The coin hit the marble floor. It didn't clatter. It hissed, a sound like wet earth settling, like a grave lid closing tight. Prince Oren stood over Lucian Vale, smiling. Not the kind of smile you get when someone pays your tab. The kind of smile you give a dog before you throw it in the river. Because Lucian wasn't just kneeling, he was being sold. The auction hall smelled of stale perfume and old blood. 30 nobles watched from their silk boxes, laughing at the final sale of House Vale's territory, Ashfall, the kingdom that had been cursed into silence, the land where kings went to die quietly. Lucian felt the weight of his prisoner's black coat, heavy, cold, damp with sweat he hadn't realized he was shedding. His father had branded himself a traitor, abandoned the people, left them to rot in the ash, and now Oren was offering this poisoned chalice for 1 copper coin, because no one else wanted it, because the curse would kill any ruler who tried to govern it. But Lucian's fingers moved on their own. He reached into his pocket, found the only thing left in the world that belonged to him, 1 copper coin. Small, rough, used by beggars and thieves. He didn't speak, he just dropped it. The silence was louder than the laughter. Oren picked up the coin. He looked at Lucian, his eyes were blue, cold, empty of anything human.
Congratulations, cousin. You are finally rich.
Lucian's breath caught in his throat, a low hum in the back of his skull. Ashfall was dead. But now, it was his dead. And Lucian Vale did not let things die quietly. He reached out and took the ruined crown from the tray. It was cracked, ivory white, sharp edges digging into his palm. Blood welled up instantly, a promise made in iron and flesh. "You own every problem no one else wanted," Oren continued, his voice smooth as oil. He stepped closer. The nobles stopped laughing. They were watching for blood. They were waiting for Lucian to break, to beg, to scream. He closed his fingers around the cracked ivory ring. The pain was sharp, clear, real. It cut through the fog of the auction hall, cut through the smell of decay, cut through the memory of his father's empty chair at the table. His eyes lifted, met Oren's. He was going to work, because he was a mediator, a contract specialist, a man who survived by reading people, finding leverage, and making impossible agreements look voluntary. And this was just another contract, a terrible one where the currency was time, and the interest rate was extinction.
Then I will make them everyone's problem.
His voice was quiet, but it carried. It cut through the silence like a blade. He didn't look at the coin. He looked past them, past the marble pillars, toward the carriage doors waiting in the shadows. Oren blinked. For a second, just a fraction of a second, his smile faltered. He expected gratitude, or hatred. Not indifference, not resolve. Lucian stood up. His legs were weak, but his spine was straight. He turned away from the prince, from the nobles, from the coin that bought a kingdom of corpses. He walked toward the doors, toward the carriage that would take him to Ashfall. The heavy doors groaned open. The wind hit him. Cold, ash-filled, bitter. He didn't look back. The heavy oak doors slammed shut behind him, cutting off the smell of perfume and the sound of cruel laughter. Lucian did not slow his pace. His boots struck the stone corridor with a rhythm that matched the thrumming in his skull. The timer was real. He could feel it ticking down, a second heart beating against his ribs. A guard stepped from the shadows of the archway. He wore the gray livery of the Sun Court's outer ring. His hand rested on the pommel of a sword that looked too heavy for him. Lucian stopped 10 feet away. The guard's eyes narrowed, assessing the man in the prisoner's coat, assessing the crown in his hand.
State your business. I am Lucian Vale, owner of Ashfall.
It was a short, barking sound that lacked any humor. He shook his head. Lord Oren's amusement ends at this door. Turn around. Go back to your cell. Lucian did not move. He held up the copper coin. It glinted under the torchlight. Oren sold me the territory, for 1 coin. I have the receipt in my pocket. The deed is in my mind. Where is the carriage? The guard's smirk faded. He stepped forward, invading Lucian's space. You think a transaction in the Sun Court binds the border guards? Ashfall is cursed. No contract survives the curse. Return to the auction hall. Beg for your life while you still have it. Lucian looked at the guard's face. He saw fear. Not of him, but of what came after him, the silence of the dead lands. If I return to the court, Oren will reclaim the sail. He will laugh while he does it. But if I go to Ashfall, the curse executes on schedule, and you and every noble in that hall become accessories to the death of a kingdom. Do you want that on your conscience?" The guard hesitated. His hand tightened on his sword hilt.
Who are you? What game is this? I am the man who bought your silence, and I intend to collect.
Lucian reached into his pocket and pulled out a small scroll of wax-sealed parchment. He tossed it onto the guard's chest. It bounced off his breastplate and slid to the floor. The seal is Prince Oren's personal wax. The content is binding. Read it, or watch your master lose face when I walk past you without a carriage. The guard looked down at the scroll, then up at Lucian, then back at the scroll. He bent down, picked it up, and broke the seal with his thumb. He scanned the text. His eyes widened. The color drained from his face.
"Bring me the royal transport now.
Lucian nodded.
Drive fast. The wind changes in an hour."
The guard turned and ran toward the stables. Lucian followed. He needed to be ready, not just for the curse, for the people, if there were any left. They emerged into the courtyard. The sky was a bruised purple, choked with smoke from distant furnaces. A black carriage waited, horses snorting steam into the cold air. The driver sat motionless on the box, face hidden by a hood. Lucian climbed in. The interior was plush velvet, stained with old wine and newer blood. He sank into the seat. The doors closed.
Drive.
The carriage lurched forward. Wheels crunched over gravel. Lucian leaned his head against the cold glass. He watched the sun court shrink in the distance. Then he closed his eyes. The timer in his mind ticked louder. 28 days, 23 hours. He had to be there before the first harvest failed, before the first child stopped crying for milk that wasn't there. The journey took 6 hours. Lucian did not sleep. He spent the time analyzing the contract in his mind. The terms were vague. Transfer of title. Possession of land. But the curse was specific. Death to the ruler upon governance. It was a trap designed to kill any heir who tried to reclaim their birthright. Oren hadn't just sold him land. He had sold him a suicide note. Lucian opened his eyes as the landscape changed. The green fields of the capital gave way to barren hills, then to gray slopes. Finally, to a valley shrouded in thick swirling mist. The air outside grew colder. Ash began to fall. Not snow, ash. Fine, black powder that coated the windows in seconds.
Stop. Here.
The carriage halted on a dirt road overlooking a town. It was small. Houses were collapsed. Windows were broken. Smoke rose from chimneys, but it was thin, weak. People moved in the streets below. Before we get into the story, do me a quick favor. Like this video, subscribe, and comment what story you want to see next. Now, let's begin. They were wrapped in rags. Their faces were gray. They moved slowly, like ghosts. Lucian pushed open the door and stepped out. The ash settled on his shoulders immediately. He inhaled. It tasted of copper and decay. He walked down the slope toward the town. A woman stood in front of a collapsed bakery. She held a bucket. Her eyes were hollow.
What do you want?
Her voice was raspy, dry. "I am Lucian Vale," he said.
I have come to govern.
It was a dry. The woman's laughter died instantly, choked by a cough that racked her thin frame. She wiped her mouth with the back of a gray hand, leaving a smear of soot on her cheekbone. Her eyes, wide and bloodshot, locked onto Lucian's face as if she were trying to read the ink in his thoughts. "You look like them," she said.
You dress like the nobles who left us to rot. You speak like the priests who prayed for rain that never came. I am not a priest.
He kept his voice low, steady. He stepped closer, careful not to crowd her space. The ash on his black coat crusted into flakes of dead skin from the valley floor. "And I am not a noble. I am your lord." The woman tilted her head. A strand of matted hair fell across her eyes. She didn't blink. "Lord, there is no lord here, only hunger, and the sky that eats us." She gestured to the clouds above. The ash swirled in thick churning vortices, blotting out the weak sun. It was a living thing. Breathing, waiting. "My name is Alara," she said. She spat on the ground near his boots.
Ilara of the Old District. If you want to govern, start by feeding us. We have eaten leather for 3 weeks. Do you have bread, or just promises?
Lucian reached into his coat pocket. He pulled out a small pouch of hardtack from his journey. It was dry as stone, but it was food. He tossed it to her. It landed in the dirt at her feet. Elara stared at the pouch, then at Lucian, then back at the pouch. She did not pick it up immediately.
A test? A down payment on the contract you didn't know you were signing.
She snatched the pouch. Her fingers trembled. She tore it open with her teeth, pulling out a piece of the hardtack. She took a bite, chewed, swallowed. The relief on her face was visceral, painful to witness. It stripped away the mask of cynicism she wore like armor.
You're serious. You actually bought this place. I did, for 1 coin, and I intend to keep it.
Elara looked at the bucket in her hands. It was empty. She dropped it. The clang echoed in the silent street.
1 coin buys nothing in Ashfall. Not anymore. The soil is dead, the wells are poison, the trees are bone. You can't govern death, Lucian Vale. You can only survive it, or die trying. Survival is the first mandate.
He pointed toward the center of the town, where a large, crumbling structure stood, the remnants of a town hall, its roof collapsed, walls, pockmarked by time and neglect.
Where do you sleep? Where do you store what little you find? The cinder keep.
She nodded toward the ruins.
It's half collapsed, half full of rats. But the basement is dry. It's the only place that doesn't smell like ash.
Take me there. Elara hesitated. She looked at the hardtack in her hand, then at the sky, where the ash fell heavier now, thickening into a gray snow. You're mad, she said.
The others won't listen to you. They think Oren is coming back. They think the curse is a punishment for sin. You're just another ghost. I am not a ghost. I am a creditor, and I collect.
He turned and began walking toward Cinderkeep. He did not wait for her to lead him. He trusted his eyes. He trusted the contract in his pocket. If Elara wanted to live, she would follow. If she didn't, she would starve alone. Elara watched him for a long moment. Then she dropped the rest of the hardtack into her mouth, chewing frantically. She turned and fell into step behind him. Her boots crunched on the ash-covered stones. Stay close, she said. The shadows move in this place. They don't like new faces. He kept his eyes forward. The town was a graveyard of stone and silence. Doors hung off their hinges. Windows were dark, empty eyes looking out onto the street. They reached the steps of Cinderkeep. The massive oak doors were gone, replaced by splintered wood and chains. Lucian stepped through the threshold. The air inside was cooler, stagnant. Dust motes danced in the slivers of light that pierced the broken roof. Elara lit a tallow candle from a pouch at her belt. The flame flickered, casting long, erratic shadows against the walls. The building was vast, once a seat of power, now a tomb for secrets. Lucian asked. He walked deeper into the hall. The floorboards groaned under his weight.
53.
She stopped at the base of the grand staircase, which led to nowhere but rubble. 53 souls. 30 children. 10 elders. 12 women. 8 men. The rest ate themselves or the ash, or they walked out into the storm and didn't come back. Lucian stopped. He turned to look at her. 53 people, a village, a kingdom, on the brink of extinction in 28 days. Lucian counted the ribs visible through the tattered shirt Elara wore. It was a ledger he understood. Numbers didn't lie. People did, but their stomachs rarely did. Where are the men? He kept his hands in his pockets. Fear was a currency he had to spend carefully. Elara shrugged. The movement made her bones creak.
Gone. Or dead. The last raid took the strong ones. Left us with the sick and the slow. We are waiting for the end, Lucian Vale. Why are you pretending otherwise? Because I am paid to find value in distressed assets.
He walked past her, stepping over a pile of rotted tapestries that once hung on the wall. The fabric disintegrated under his boots. And because Oren wants me dead, as long as I breathe, he loses. Elara stared at his back. Her eyes narrowed.
You speak of him like a rival. He is your cousin. Blood is irrelevant in contract law.
He stopped near the edge of the collapsed grand staircase. The rubble below was a tangle of stone and splintered wood. He sold me this ruin to bury it. I intend to dig it out. A sound echoed from the shadows to their left. Dry coughing, ragged breathing. Then, the shuffle of bare feet on stone. Lucian turned. 3 figures emerged from the gloom. They were hunched, wrapped in furs that smelled of mildew and wet dog. Their faces were gaunt, eyes sunken deep into skulls. One of them spoke. The voice was thin, reedy. Is he staying? Or is he leaving? Lucian looked at Alara. She did not move to answer. She was waiting to see how he handled the wild card. In negotiation, silence was a lever. But in survival, hesitation was death. I am Lucian Vale, he said to the group. He did not raise his voice. He let it carry across the dust-filled air. I own the land beneath your feet. I own the roof above your heads. I will provide shelter. In exchange, you work. The tallest of the 3 spat on the floor. The spittle landed near Lucian's boot.
Work? For what? There is no gold here. There is no food. There is only ash. Food.
He pulled another piece of hardtack from his pocket. It was stale, gray, but it was solid matter. Shelter. Order. If you work, you eat. If you refuse, you starve. I do not negotiate with ghosts. The spitting man stepped forward. He was missing 2 fingers on his left hand. The nails were black with dirt.
And who are you to command us? You look like a child playing king. I am the only one standing between you and the sky.
He held up the hardtack.
Take it, or leave it. Your choice.
The man stared at the bread. His stomach growled, audible in the silence. He looked at his companions. They were watching him, hungry, desperate. The power dynamic shifted instantly. The threat of violence was gone, replaced by the terror of starvation. The man reached out a trembling hand. Give it here. Lucian tossed it. It landed in the man's palm. He snatched it up and began to tear at the crust with his teeth. Saliva mixed with the dust.
Who are you?
Mouth full.
Alara.
He didn't look at her. He looked at the rubble below.
She told me.
The man chewed aggressively.
We are the left behind. That is what we call ourselves. We were left behind when the nobles fled. When the magic broke. When the Ashfall came. Magic broke?
He felt a twitch in his jaw. A memory surfaced. Unbidden. His father's face, pale and sweating, writing letters that were never sent. The ink bleeding through the paper. The fear in his eyes. It is not a curse, the memory whispered. It is a seal.
The covenant broke.
She stepped closer to Lucian. Her voice was low, intimate.
The first king made a pact with the earth. In exchange for prosperity, we gave him our loyalty. When his line died out, the pact dissolved. The land turned against us. It doesn't kill us all at once. It eats us slowly.
Lucian looked at her. How long has it been? 3 years, she said, since the last harvest failed, since the wells dried up, since the midnight march began to circle our borders, hunting the strays. The spitting man finished the hardtack and licked his fingers. He grinned, showing blackened teeth.
The midnight march? You mean the shadows that eat people in the night? They are not shadows.
Her face went pale.
They are the enforcers. They kill anyone who tries to leave Ashfall. Anyone who tries to build anything new. They keep us trapped, feeding on our despair.
Lucian felt a cold knot form in his stomach. The timer in his mind ticked.
If they are enforcers, they follow rules. Even curses have rules. There are no rules in Ashfall. Rules require parties to honor their end.
His voice cutting through the man's shout like glass on stone.
What was the price? And what did we give?
Hope. We gave him hope. And he left us with this rot. Lucian pulled a small, tarnished ledger from his coat. The pages were brittle, filled with his father's frantic scrawl. My father didn't leave. He was erased, and the price wasn't hope. It was consent. Alara stepped forward, her eyes wide. Consent.
The covenant was voluntary.
Turning the ledger toward them.
I can see the clauses in the ink. You agreed to feed the land. In return, it protected you. When your ancestors stopped believing, they stopped feeding it. The land didn't attack. It just stopped holding back.
The spitting man stared at the book. His hands trembled.
So you're saying it's not a curse? It's a contract breach? Exactly.
He closed the ledger with a sharp snap.
And I'm here to renegotiate.
The carriage wheels crunched over gravel that sounded like broken teeth. Lucian Vale sat upright, his back stiff against the rotting velvet of the seat, watching the gates of Ashfall rise through the mist. They were iron ribs, rusted into permanent screams, guarding a mouth that had long since lost its tongue. He did not look away. He remembered the coin in his palm, cold and insignificant, and the laugh of Prince Oren, which still echoed in the hollow of his chest like a trapped bird. Congratulations, cousin. You are finally rich. You own every problem no one else wanted. Lucian closed his fingers around the cracked ivory ring on his left hand. Then I will make them everyone's problem. The gates groaned open, not by force, but by surrender to gravity. The carriage rolled forward into Cinderkeep. The air here was thick with the scent of wet ash and old blood. It did not smell like a kingdom. It smelled like a grave that refused to close. Lucian stepped out onto the cobblestones. His boots sank slightly into the soft gray dust that covered everything. Around him, the ruins of the capital stood as silent judges. Buildings slumped into themselves, their roofs caved in by decades of neglect and worse, their windows staring out like empty eye sockets. But it was the sound that stopped his breath. A low, resonant hum vibrated through the soles of his feet, climbing up his legs and settling in his teeth. It was the last bell. Lucian looked up toward the bell tower, a jagged spire of black stone piercing the bruised sky. The massive bronze face of the bell hung motionless, but it rang without being struck. Each tone was heavy, dull, and final. 1 ring, 2 rings, 3. With each vibration, a figure appeared in his mind's eye, not as a ghost, but as data etched into reality by some terrible invisible law. He saw them, 7 names, 7 faces, carved into the mental landscape of the tower. They were adults who had tried to cross the border during the previous week. They had failed. Now, they were part of the toll. Lucian's breath hitched. The Covenant system activated in his mind, not with a fanfare, but with the cold precision of a spreadsheet opening. Kingdom Covenant system activated. Domain, Ashfall Ruins, population 112, royal authority, 0 prosperity, D curse stability, 3% estimated time until total extinction. 29 days, the numbers floated in his vision, stark and unforgiving. He had no army, no gold, no allies, just 112 starving citizens and a timer ticking down toward midnight extinction. You stand on my grave, Prince. The voice came from the shadows of a collapsed archway. A woman stepped into the dim light, her silhouette sharp against the gray background. She wore the tattered remnants of a border guard's uniform, the leather cracked and stained. In her hand, she held a sword that had seen too many battles and not enough maintenance. The blade was dull, but the grip was sure. She arrested him at sword point, the tip hovering inches from his throat. The metal was cold enough to bite through his skin if she pushed harder. Make one order that costs them more than it costs you, and I will hang you from your own gate. Lucian did not flinch. He looked past the steel, past her hardened eyes, to the huddled group of children shivering behind her. Their ribs showed through their rags like the rungs of a ladder leading nowhere. They were not cursed citizens. They were people, and they were starving. Then stay close, Captain. Lucian's voice was calm, stripped of the fear that should have been there. I intend to make expensive promises. Seraphine's jaw tightened. Her eyes narrowed, searching for the lie, the trick, the negotiator's trap she expected from a veil. She found only stillness. You have no coin, she said, her gaze dropping to his empty pockets.
You have no soldiers. You have no power. Why are you here? To survive, and to ensure you do. The curse does not care about your survival.
Seraphine spat. She lowered the sword an inch, just enough to signal she was listening, but not enough to trust.
More than a tyrant,
He took a step forward, ignoring the blade that tracked his movement. The air around him grew heavy, charged with the static of the system waiting for input. The hunger in the town was a physical weight, pressing against his lungs. Fear was a scent, cloying and sharp. Trust was absent, a void where it should be. The system highlighted this void. Emergency royal clause available. A king may not demand what he will not first endure. Lucian felt the clause settle in his bones, a legal construct woven into magic. It was a contract, and like any contract, it required terms to be explicit. He looked at the children again.
I don't want to eat.
His voice cutting through the heavy air like a scalpel.
I want you to stop watching me with that look.
Seraphine didn't blink. The tip of her sword remained steady against his throat, a cold, unyielding point of truth.
The look is called survival instinct, Prince. It keeps your teeth in your head when the wolves come. And right now, I am the only wolf you have left. Then you can eat first.
He didn't retreat. Instead, he leaned forward, pressing his collarbone against the flat of her blade. The metal bit into his skin, drawing a bead of blood that welled up dark and bright against the pale ivory of the ring on his finger. "Eat. Before I change my mind about sharing." She pulled back instantly, breaking the contact with a sharp hiss of leather and steel. Her breath hitched, not from fear of him, but from the sheer audacity of his offer. "You are mad," she said, wiping a speck of blood from her neck with the back of her gauntlet.
A prince who offers his own flesh to beggars? The courts will say you are plotting something. The court sold me for a copper coin and laughed.
He straightened his coat, ignoring the sting of the cut.
I don't care what they think anymore. I care about whether there is food in this town or if we are all going to turn into ash before the month is out.
Behind Seraphine, a small boy stepped forward from the shadows of the archway. He was thin enough that his ribs looked like the bars of a cage. He held out a tin cup, empty and dented. His eyes were wide, fixed on Lucian's face with a mix of hope and terror. "Is it true?" the boy asked. His voice was thin, reedy. "Are you really our king now?" Seraphine moved to shove the child back, but Lucian raised a hand. The gesture was slow, deliberate. He walked past the sword, past the captain, and stopped in front of the boy. Up close, he could see the grime caked under the child's fingernails, the hollows of his cheeks, the desperate hunger that had become the default state of Ashfall.
It is true.
He didn't look away.
But being a king doesn't mean I have power over you. It means I have responsibility for you. And right now, my responsibility is very empty.
Empty. The woman's voice was sharp, bitter.
You come into our home with empty hands and full promises? That is worse than theft. Theft leaves you with something. You leave us with nothing but more pain. I am leaving myself to join you.
He turned his gaze to her, locking eyes with the former captain.
I am not asking for loyalty. I am not asking for obedience. I am asking for a seat at your table. And since there is no table and no chairs, I will sit on the floor until someone gives me a crust.
Seraphine stared at him. Her jaw worked, the muscles tightening as she fought the urge to strike or to flee. "If you stay," she said slowly, testing the weight of the words,
"You will follow every order we give. You will eat whatever scraps are left for us, and if you try to rule us, I will kill you myself. I agree to all terms."
He didn't hesitate. He extended his hand, palm up, an open gesture of surrender that felt heavier than any contract he had ever signed in the corporate world. "But I need one thing from you first. Not food, not shelter, information." Seraphine looked at his hand as if it were a live wire. She did not take it. Instead, she pointed her sword toward the darkness behind her, toward the deeper recesses of Cinderkeep where the ruins swallowed the light. "The grain store is empty," she said.
It has been empty for 10 years. The last shipment was stolen by the bandits who live in the northern mines. We have no trade routes, we have no allies, and we have a curse that kills anyone who tries to leave. Then the problem is not hunger.
He turned his back on her, a calculated risk that made Seraphine gasp in surprise. He walked toward the edge of the square, where the ground sloped down into a sunken market district. The cobblestones here were slick with condensation.
"Where are you going?" "To find what we have left,"
Lucian called back. He moved with the purpose of a man who had nothing to lose and everything to gain. If the grain store is empty, then the floor must be hiding something. People don't hide food where it's obvious. They hide it where no one looks. Seraphine yelled. She hurried after him, her boots clanging against the stone, her sword still drawn but lowered. "Lucian, stop!" There is nothing. Lucian did not stop. He dropped to his knees, ignoring the damp cold seeping through his trousers, and dug his fingers into the loose earth of the market square's foundation. The soil was dry, cracked from years of neglect, but beneath the top layer lay the packed mud of the old royal granary's floor.
Stop. It is not safe. I would prefer a roof.
Wedging his thumb under a loose flagstone, it shifted with a grinding screech that sounded like bones snapping. A collapse is quick. Starvation is slow. I've never been good at waiting for slow deaths. He wrenched the stone free. Dust plumed into the air, choking and gray. Behind the stone was not dirt, but a hollow space, lined with rotting timber beams that had held firm despite the decay of decades. And in the corner of that hollow, wrapped in oilcloth so old it had turned to leather, was a sack. Lucian grabbed the handle and hauled it out. It was heavy, denser than any grain sack he had carried in his previous life. He set it down on the wet cobblestones and cut the ties with the edge of his broken crown's ring. The oilcloth fell away to reveal golden kernels, dry and hard but unmistakably whole. Embergrain, the system's hidden resource. Seraphine stared at the sack, her sword tip dipped, forgotten in her grip. "That is impossible," she said. Her voice was low, stripped of its earlier hostility. He reached into the sack and pulled out a handful of seeds. They were small, dark, and smelled faintly of smoke. He held them out to her. "These are not food yet, but they are future food, and they are mine to give or keep." Seraphine did not take them. She stepped back, her eyes wide with a mixture of awe and terror.
What have you done? How did the system reveal this? I made a promise.
He stood up, brushing the dirt from his coat. The air around him hummed, a low-frequency vibration that made his teeth ache. He could feel the shift in the kingdom's weight. The curse was reacting. "I swore I would endure what they endured, and the contract balanced the ledger." Endure? Seraphine repeated the word as if it were a foreign language.
Then I will haunt efficiently.
He closed the sack and handed it to her. His fingers brushed hers, cold and calloused. "Feed the children, not from this yet. Plant a seed in each of their palms. Tell them to hold on to it. It is a promise that they are not forgotten." Seraphine looked at the seeds, then at Lucian. Her expression was unreadable, a mask of shock trying to find its way to skepticism.
And you? I will go to the bell tower.
He turned toward the dark structure looming at the center of the ruins, its silhouette jagged against the bruised purple sky.
I need to ring it for the dead, not to mourn them. To remind the living that the timer is still counting. You cannot ring the bell of Ashfall.
Her voice was firm now, returning to its practical edge.
Then I will make them listen,
Lucian said. He began to walk away, his stride long and determined.
By breaking the silence that keeps us dead. Lucian, I will.
He looked at her, his eyes dark and steady.
But only if you keep your end of the bargain. Keep the seeds safe, and tell no one I have power yet. Let them think I am just another starving noble until the first harvest comes.
"And if they kill you before then?" she asked. The question hung in the air, heavy and cold. Lucian smiled, a thin, dangerous curve of his lips. "They can try, but I have already made an expensive promise to stay alive long enough to fix this place, and unlike your captains, I do not break my contracts." He stepped around her, his coat swirling in the damp wind. As he moved toward the shadow of the bell tower, the system's voice echoed in his mind, clear and devoid of emotion. "Covenant accepted. The Crown shares the hunger Royal Authority 03 hidden resource revealed Embergrain Seeds X14. The numbers meant nothing to the people huddled in the square. They only saw a man walking into the dark alone. But as Lucian climbed the first, Lucian did not look back at the system's notification. The numbers were irrelevant to the physical reality climbing up the spiral staircase of the bell tower, each step worn smooth by generations of despair. He climbed until his lungs burned and his legs shook, not from fear, but from the sheer caloric deficit that was now a permanent state of being. The air near the top was thinner, colder, carrying the metallic tang of ozone that always preceded a midnight death. At the summit, the bell tower's open archway framed a view of Cinderkeep in ruins. Below, the remaining citizens huddled in groups, their shadows long and thin against the purple dusk. They looked small, fragile, like paper figures waiting for a match. Lucian reached the base of the great bronze bell. It was massive, cracked down the middle, its clapper hanging limp like a dead tongue. He placed his hands on the cold metal. It vibrated under his palms, not with sound, but with potential energy, the system's interface pulsing in time with his heartbeat. "Come to join them?" The voice came from the shadows behind him. Seraphine stood there, her sword still drawn, though she had lowered it to her side. Her face was illuminated by the fading light of the dying sun, highlighting the sharp angles of her cheekbones and the exhaustion in her eyes. She did not step closer. She waited at the threshold of the archway, giving him space to fall if he chose to.
I came to ring it.
He kept his hands on the bell.
For those who are already gone, you cannot ring it.
Her tone was flat, devoid of hope but full of fact.
The clapper is broken off. The chain is rusted through. It will not move.
Then I will break the silence another way. Lucian gripped the base of the bell with both hands and pulled. His muscles screamed, his knuckles turning white. Nothing happened. The bell was immovable.
The mechanism is stiff. The metal has fused with time. Time has forgotten us.
She leaned against the stone archway, watching him struggle.
And you are forgetting that you are weak. A prince who cannot lift a bell is no better than the peasants in the mud.
Lucian gritted his teeth and pulled harder. He ignored the burning in his shoulders. He focused on the system's prompt hovering in his mind's eye. Royal authority, 3. 3 units of power. Not enough to move stone. Not enough to feed a kingdom, but enough to make a promise that mattered.
Watch me.
You say I am weak. You are right. My body is failing. My resources are 0. My authority is negligible. Then why are you here?
Seraphine asked. The question was a challenge, not a curiosity. She pushed off the archway and took one step forward, her eyes narrowing.
Why risk your neck for people who do not want to be saved by a stranger? Because I am the only one with nothing left to lose.
He pointed at the bell.
And because someone has to remind them that they are still alive.
He reached out and touched the cracked bronze surface again. This time he did not pull. He pressed his forehead against it, closing his eyes. He felt the cold seep into his skin, a stark contrast to the feverish heat of his own desperation. He spoke aloud, his voice steady despite the fatigue dragging at his limbs.
I swear.
The words hung in the air, heavy and precise.
I swear by the blood in my veins and the crown on my head that I will eat only after every child in Ashfall has eaten. I swear I will remain within these borders until every citizen is free from fear. And I swear that if I break this vow, let this bell fall on my grave.
The air in the tower shifted. The temperature dropped sharply. Frost crept across the bronze surface of the bell, spiraling out from Lucian's touch. A bright white light flared beneath his skin, tracing lines up his arms across his chest, settling over his heart like a brand. Seraphine gasped and stepped back, her sword snapping up again.
What was that? A binding?
He opened his eyes. The pain in his shoulders was gone, replaced by a dull, resonant thrum in his chest. He felt weaker physically, but stronger in a way he had never experienced in the corporate world. A covenant. Not with you, with them. He tapped the bell once. A single, clear note rang out, deep and mournful, vibrating through the stone floor and into the bones of anyone listening below. It was not loud, but it carried. It traveled over the ruins, past the huddled crowds, down to the poisoned river, and up to the cursed mountains. The bell did not swing, but the sound lingered, a ghost in the machinery of the dead kingdom. He felt the weight of the vows settling into him, a heavy cloak he could not remove. It tasted like ash and iron. Seraphine lowered her sword slowly, her face pale. She looked at the white scars forming on Lucian's chest through his black coat. You actually did it. You tied your life to theirs. I tied my survival to their hope, Lucian corrected. He walked past her toward the edge of the tower, looking out over Cinderkeep. The carriage wheels ground against the obsidian pavement, a harsh, grinding sound that vibrated through the floorboards and into Lucian's bones. He sat rigidly on the hard bench, his hands resting on his knees to keep them from trembling. The black coat he wore felt heavier than lead, draped over shoulders that had once held no weight at all. Outside the stained glass windows, the city of Oren blurred into a smear of gray and gold, fading rapidly as the driver whipped the horses into a trot. But they were not leaving the problem. The problem was now his skin. Seraphine Dusk sat across from him, her posture straight enough to cut glass. Her uniform was torn, the fabric stained with the ash that coated half the kingdom, but her eyes were clear and hard. She watched Lucian with a mixture of skepticism and professional detachment. She had been captain of the border guard before it was dissolved into dust. She knew what a commander looked like. And currently, she saw only a man in a prisoner's coat holding a cracked ivory ring.
You paid a copper coin.
Her voice flat, devoid of any congratulatory warmth.
For a tomb.
Lucian closed his fingers around the ring until the edges dug into his palm. The bone felt cold and dead. I paid for a contract, and contracts can be renegotiated. Seraphine snorted softly, turning her head to look out the window as the scenery shifted from polished marble to rotting timber. My name is Lucian, he said quietly.
And the earth isn't my debtor. It's my client.
Her boots clicked against the floor as she leaned forward. Oren didn't sell you a kingdom. He sold you a corpse. You have 29 days before the curse consumes everyone in Ashfall. Do you have any gold? Any soldiers? Any leverage left? Lucian looked at her, his expression calm despite the cold knot in his stomach. He had survived by reading them, by finding the crack in their armor where truth could slip through. This was no different. The stakes were higher death, not just ruin, but the mechanics of survival were identical.
I have a promise.
And I know how to keep it. A promise won't stop the rot. I've seen what happens when we try to farm this land. The soil takes what you give it, and then it takes your life. You think a contract can bind a curse? It's a wild beast, not a merchant.
It's not a curse if it's just a system waiting for the right terms.
He reached into his pocket and pulled out the small, crumpled map of Ashfall he had kept in his memories. He unfolded it on his knee. Seraphine stared at the map, her eyes narrowing.
You want to fix a mill with your bare hands? You're a negotiator, not a laborer. You'll die in 3 days trying to move a stone that weighs more than you do. I won't be alone.
He pointed to a cluster of markers on the map.
There are people there, people who have nothing left to lose. If I can convince them to help me, we might stand a chance.
Convince? They won't listen to you. They see you as one of them, just another noble who failed. They see the black coat and the ring, and they smell the auction hall on you. You're tainted by Oren's gold. Why would Tomas listen to you? Why would anyone? Lucian folded the map carefully, sliding it back into his pocket.
Because I'm not asking them to trust me. I'm asking them to save themselves. And because I don't offer gold, I offer a choice. A choice is useless when there's no alternative.
Leaning back against the seat, she crossed her arms, her expression hardening. You're playing a dangerous game, Lucian. Oren thinks you'll break. He wants to watch you fail so he can prove that House Vale deserves to be erased. Don't give him the satisfaction. The sky was darkening, the purple hues of Ashfall's atmosphere bleeding into the twilight. It was terrifying, yes, but it was also real. And for the first time in years, he wasn't dealing with abstract numbers or fictional threats. This was survival. Raw, unfiltered, and immediate.
Oren made a mistake. He thought he was selling me a problem. He didn't realize he was giving me a platform.
Seraphine shook her head slowly.
You're insane. Maybe, but I'm alive, and as long as I'm breathing, the contract isn't closed.
The carriage hit a pothole. The carriage shuddered, throwing Lucian forward against his will. He caught himself on the velvet seat, his knuckles white as he steadied his breathing. The landscape outside had darkened into the bruised purples and grays characteristic of Ashfall's twilight, the air growing thicker, heavier with the metallic tang of old blood and sulfur. It smelled like a graveyard left to rot in the sun. Seraphine didn't flinch at the jolt. She watched him with the cold precision of a hawk tracking prey. "We are close," she said. Her hand rested on the hilt of a rusted sword at her hip. "The Blackwater River is swelling. The poison is leaching into the lower districts first. If we don't get to the mill before nightfall, the flood will take the shelters." Lucian pulled the map from his pocket again, smoothing it out on his knee despite the vibration of the coach.
Then we stop asking questions and start making deals. The system is waiting for terms. I just need to find a signatory. You treat people like clauses in a contract?
Her voice was low, edged with disdain.
They are not paper. They are starving, frightened animals. You cannot negotiate with a rat on the edge of death. You have to feed it or kill it.
I can do both.
His eyes scanning the lines of the map until they landed on the jagged sketch of the Blackwater Mill. But first we need eyes on the ground. Someone who understands the lay of the land without having to guess. Seraphine scoffed, turning her face toward the window. "You are learning nothing. You think because you speak softly, people will listen. Ashfall does not care for your soft words. It cares for strength, and you have none." Lucian lowered the map. He felt the weight of the cracked ivory ring pressing into his palm again. It was a reminder of the absurdity of it all, a curse bound by nothing more than his own willingness to accept it. But he knew, deep in the core of his corporate-trained mind, that value was perception. If he believed this land had value, someone else might too.
I am not here to be strong. I am here to be useful. There is a difference. Strength breaks. Utility endures.
Seraphine turned back to him, her eyes flashing with irritation.
Utility? You think you are useful to these people? They see your coat. They see your face. They know what it means to wear house veil. To them, you are not a savior. You are the aristocracy that abandoned them to die. Then I will make sure they see my hands.
He tucked the map away and stood up as the carriage slowed.
When we get out, I do not speak of contracts. I do not speak of terms. I pick up a tool, and if I fall before I lift it, you can drag me back to the auction hall yourself.
The carriage lurched to a halt. The doors swung open, revealing a world of ash and gray stone. The wind hit Lucian instantly, carrying the scent of wet rot and ozone. He stepped down onto the muddy road, his boots sinking slightly into the slush. Seraphine followed, her movements fluid and predatory. Ahead of them, the silhouette of the Blackwater Mill loomed against the dimming sky. Its water wheel was still, a massive skeleton of blackened timber. Around it, figures moved in the shadows, gaunt, hollow-eyed people dragging baskets of useless soil. One figure broke away from the group and walked toward the gate. He was old, his back bent like a willow branch in a storm, leaning heavily on a crooked staff. His face was a map of wrinkles, his eyes clouded with cataracts, but sharp with suspicion. Lucian stepped forward, ignoring Seraphine's warning grip on his arm.
Old man.
His voice was steady, cutting through the wind. I need to borrow your labor. The old man stopped. He tilted his head, listening to the words as if they were in a foreign tongue. Labor? He croaked. His voice was dry, like leaves skittering on stone.
We have no food to pay for it. We have no wood to heat our homes. Why should I give you anything? Because your mill is broken.
He pointed to the silent water wheel.
And because the river is rising. If you do not fix the flow, the water will take your children's shelter by morning.
A glob of black phlegm landed near Lucian's boot. My name is Tomas, he said. He didn't look at Lucian. He looked past him, at the darkness gathering behind his son. And my wife died in that mill. 10 years ago. The royal oath took her first, then it took her strength. Now it wants to take her memory. Lucian felt a chill that had nothing to do with the wind. He remembered the memories in his head, the flash of an old document, the smell of ink and blood.
I know, the oath was flawed. It demanded more than the land could give. It did not offer protection in return.
Thomas laughed, a bitter hacking sound.
Protection? From whom? The king is dead. The prince is gone. We are alone here. What can you offer, boy? A copper coin? No.
He looked Tomas directly in the eye.
I offer a covenant.
One that binds me to Lucian kept his gaze fixed on Tomas's clouded eyes, refusing to blink first. One that binds me to you as tightly as it binds the water to the wheel. If I walk away from this repair, if I let my hands rest while yours bleed, then the covenant is void, and I am nothing more than a thief. Tomas squinted, his head tilting further to the side as he tried to parse the weight of the words. You speak like a lawyer, he said. He spat again, this time closer to Lucian's boot.
Laws are for men who have something to lose. We have nothing. Why should I trust a promise from a noble's boy? Because I am not asking for your trust.
He reached into his black coat and pulled out a small rusted wrench he had swiped from the carriage's emergency kit before they left the capital. I am offering my sweat. You fix the gate. I fix the wheel. We share the risk. Seraphine stepped forward, her hand resting on the pommel of her sword. He speaks truth, old man, she said, her voice flat and devoid of warmth. The water is rising. The flood will not care whose children sleep in that shelter. If you want them to live, you need a mill that turns, and you need one who knows how to work. Tomas looked from Lucian to Seraphine, his expression unreadable. She sounds like a soldier, he muttered.
You sound like a politician. Both of you smell of death. What do you want from us? Our labor? Our lives? We want your land to survive.
He held out the wrench, handle first.
But more than that, we want to prove that Ashfall is not just a grave. It is a home, and homes require maintenance.
Thomas hesitated for a long moment, the wind whipping his gray hair across his face. Then, slowly, he reached out and took the wrench. His fingers were gnarled, stained with dirt and old blood.
If you break it, I will kill you myself. I expect nothing less.
He rolled up the sleeves of his black coat, revealing pale, soft arms that looked utterly ill-suited for manual labor. He followed Tomas toward the mill's base, ignoring Seraphine's warning glare. Inside the mill, the air was thick with the smell of damp wood and mold. Water dripped from the ceiling in a steady, rhythmic cadence. Lucian picked up a hammer, testing its weight in his hand. It felt heavy, unbalanced, and wrong. Where do I start? Tomas pointed a crooked finger at the main axle. The bearing is seized. Rust has eaten through the metal. You need to hammer it loose, then chisel out the rot, but be careful, the teeth are sharp, they bite back. Lucian stepped up to the massive gear. He raised the hammer and struck it once. The sound was dull and dead. Nothing happened. He struck again, harder. His shoulder screamed in protest. He paused, breathing heavily, sweat pricking his forehead despite the chill. It stuck, he said, lowering the hammer. It's worse than I thought. Tomas grunted, leaning on his staff as he watched.
Of course it is. It has been 10 years. 10 years of neglect. 10 years of rulers who took and never gave. You think a few swings will fix it? I think one swing at a time will do it.
He raised the hammer again. This time, he didn't just use his arm, he used his back, his legs, every muscle in his body. The impact jarred his teeth. A crack echoed through the mill. Then another. The gear shuddered. You are weak, Tomas observed. His tone was not mocking anymore, it was merely factual.
Your form is poor. You fight like a man who has never had to feed himself. I fight like a man who knows how to read a room.
Wiping sweat from his eyes, he struck again. The gear groaned, a low, metallic sound that vibrated in his chest. And right now, this room is talking to me. What is it saying? He shifted his weight, leaning closer.
It's saying that it's tired.
He paused, listening. Beneath the drip of water and the wind outside, he could hear the faint creak of metal under strain. It's saying that it's been holding its breath for 10 years, and it wants to exhale. Seraphine stood in the shadows near the entrance, her arms crossed. She watched Lucian work, her expression unreadable. You are speaking to machinery, she said. Her voice was quiet, but it carried clearly. This is madness. Lucian ignored her. He struck the gear again and again. With each blow, he felt a connection form, a tangible link between his effort and the machine's resistance. It wasn't just physical, it was contractual. He was putting in work, the mill was accepting it, the balance was shifting.
Why do you care?
He had moved closer, watching Lucian's face as he worked.
Why does a noble boy care about a broken wheel?
Lucian paused, resting the hammer on his shoulder. He looked at Tomas, really looked at him, seeing the deep lines of grief and exhaustion etched into his skin.
Because I am tired of losing.
His voice was calm. He dropped the hammer. It clattered against the stone floor, the sound sharp and final in the damp silence.
And because I have learned that leverage is not something you take. It is something you create.
Tomas frowned, his brow furrowing deep.
Leverage? Exactly.
He walked over to the water wheel's main axle, placing a hand on the cold, rusted iron. In my old life, I mediated disputes between companies that hated each other. They would never agree unless there was a third party they trusted more than their own greed. That third party is now me, and the agreement is simple. I work until my hands bleed. You watch. If I stop, the mill stays broken. If I continue, the mill turns. And if the mill turns, the water recedes from your children's home. Seraphine stepped out of the shadows, her boots crunching on the gravel. He speaks plainly, she said. She crossed her arms, her expression skeptical but listening. But words do not hold back floodwaters. Iron does. Wood does. You are wasting time with philosophy when you should be striking. Lucian turned to her, his face streaked with grime and sweat. Striking without purpose is just violence, he said. I need a system, a structure. Tomas knows the mill's history better than any engineer in the capital. I need him to tell me where the weakness lies, not where the metal is hardest. Tomas looked at Seraphine, then back to Lucian. He asks for advice, the old man said slowly.
A noble prince, asking a broken farmer for guidance. I am no longer a prince, and you are no longer just a farmer. You are the guardian of this mill, and right now, the guardian is obsolete because the gear is seized. So, give me the instruction. Tell me where to strike next. Not with your hands, with your knowledge.
Tomas was silent for a long moment. The wind howled through the broken windows, rattling the loose panes. He leaned on his staff, his eyes narrowing as he studied Lucian's face.
There is a pin, hidden behind the secondary drive shaft. It sheared off years ago. Without it, the pressure builds until the bearing cracks. You are hitting the symptom, not the disease.
Lucian nodded. He moved to the side of the wheel, peering into the dark crevice between the gears. Show me where, he said. Tomas shuffled closer, pointing a trembling finger into the darkness.
There, behind the rusted plate. You will need to pry it open without crushing the teeth. I have a chisel.
He grabbed the tool from his belt and knelt beside the axle.
Hold this light for me.
Tomas grunted but obliged, leaning over to peer into the gap. Careful, he warned.
If you strip the thread, the whole assembly will fail. I am not trying to fix it for today.
His voice was low, focused.
I am setting up for tomorrow. Today, I just need to bypass the blockage long enough to show your people that work is possible.
Seraphine watched him kneel in the dirt, her hand resting on her sword hilt. You are making a deal with a man who has nothing left to lose, she said.
What happens when he realizes you have no power here? Then I will have earned my keep.
He wedged the chisel into place and struck it with a hammer. The metal shrieked. Sparks flew, illuminating the dark space for a split second.
And if I fail, I will learn why. That is how negotiation works, Seraphine. You offer value. If they reject it, you adjust the terms. You do not walk away until the table is empty. And if the table is already empty?
Seraphine asked.
Then we build a new table,
Lucian said. He struck again. The chisel slipped, tearing his palm. Blood welled up, bright red against the gray rust. He didn't stop. And I will bleed on it. Tomas watched the blood drip onto the gear. His eyes widened slightly. You are hurt, he said. I am working, Lucian corrected. He pulled the chisel out and examined the hole. It worked. The pressure is gone. Now, help me rotate the shaft manually. Just an inch. Tomas hesitated, then placed his hands on the wooden beam beside the axle. Seraphine joined him on the other side. Together, the three of them pushed. The wood groaned. The metal protested. And slowly, impossibly, the wheel turned 1 inch. Then another. He looked at Lucian with a mixture of awe and fear.
Keep going.
His arm burned. His shoulders screamed. But he held fast.
Until it locks. Then we rest. And then we do it again.
Seraphine pulled back, wiping sweat from her forehead. This is inefficient, she muttered, though there was no malice in her voice. Lucian laughed, a breathless, ragged sound. Efficiency is for those who have resources, he said. We are running on desperation, and desperation is a powerful fuel. The wheel turned another inch. The water outside began to... The wind in Ashfall did not howl. It scratched against the stone walls like 1,000 dry fingers seeking entry. Lucian Vale stood on the ramparts of Cinderkeep, his hands gripping the cold, rough edge of the parapet until his knuckles turned white. Below him, the valley lay shrouded in a perpetual gray twilight, the black glass ruins of the city spreading out like scars upon the earth. He wore the prisoner's black coat still, the fabric stiff with ash and dried blood, but he felt no cold. The system had not given him soldiers. It had not given him gold. It had given him the truth. Ashfall was dying, and 29 days remained before the last citizen turned to ash. He looked out toward the northern pass, where the horizon was often obscured by the shimmering, violent edge of the midnight march. The border curse was destabilizing faster than his calculations had predicted. The timer in his mind ticked down with mechanical indifference. Your Highness. Lucian did not turn. He recognized the voice from the carriage ride. Kalin, the only remaining knight who had sworn loyalty to House Vale before the auction, stood a few paces back, his hand resting on the hilt of a rusted sword. His armor was patched with leather and scrap metal. The heraldry faded to invisibility.
Report.
His voice flat, stripped of the royal cadence he had inherited, but refused to wear as a mask. Kalin stepped forward, the gravel crunching under his boots. The iron-tithe Republic's vanguard has breached the outer perimeter. They are not attacking. They are setting up camp. 300 wagons. Grain. Medical supplies. Lucian closed his eyes. He could hear the whispers of the 112 citizens below him, the fear that radiated from the few remaining buildings like heat waves. They did not trust relief. To them, every arrival was a prelude to betrayal. The royal bloodline had sealed the curse after all. Why would they expect anything different?
Who leads them?
Lucian asked.
A marshal named Drenvos. He requests an audience with the ruler of Ashfall. He claims Ashfall's debt from the previous century has matured.
Lucian turned then, his face impassive.
Debt? We have no treasury. We have no trade routes. What debt could possibly be owed to men who haven't spoken to us in 50 years? Grain loans during the long famine, interest compounded daily by the Republic's ledger mages. They claim it totals 300% of Ashfall's current population value.
Lucian's jaw tightened. It was a classic hostile takeover strategy. Buy the debt, force the foreclosure, strip the assets. But Ashfall had no assets left to strip. Only people, and people who could be classified as equipment if the right contract was signed. He had seen this in corporate boardrooms on Earth. The paperwork was always designed to make the victim feel grateful for the chain they were being forced into.
Tell Marshal Voss I will meet him at the Gate of Whispers. Bring Starless Oath.
Kalen hesitated.
Sir, your sword is ceremonial. Its blade records promises, not cuts. I do not intend to cut anyone today.
He reached into his pocket and pulled out the cracked ivory ring he had bought with 1 copper coin. He rubbed his thumb over the rough surface. I intend to rewrite the terms of our existence. He walked past Kalen, descending the spiral stairs toward the courtyard. The air grew thicker with the smell of damp stone and despair. As he reached the main gate, the massive iron doors groaned open, revealing the procession outside. The wagons were pristine, painted in the Republic's crimson and gold, a stark contrast to the grayscale decay of Ashfall. At their head stood a man in polished armor, his cape billowing in the cursed wind. Dren Voss dismounted before Lucian could approach. He was tall, with a face carved from stone and eyes that missed nothing. He did not bow. Instead, he extended a scroll sealed with wax the color of dried blood.
Lucian Vale, the boy who bought a graveyard. I brought your inheritance.
Lucian stopped 10 paces away. The distance felt insufficient. You brought a noose, Marshal. Do not pretend it is a gift. Voss smiled, a thin stretching of lips that did not reach his eyes.
We are men of business, cousin. Business requires clarity. Ashfall owes us grain. We have paid the storage costs, the interest, and the risk premium for 50 years. Today we collect. By what authority?
Though he already knew, the system hummed in his mind, a low vibration against his ribs. Hostile contract detected. Voss tapped the scroll. The covenant of sustenance. Standard clause for indebted vassals. You sign, we provide food for 30 days. In exchange, all future births within Ashfall's borders become Republic property for 50 years. A small price for survival. Lucian looked at the scroll. He could see the text shimmering in his vision, overlaid by the system's analysis. The invisible subclause glowed red, personhood classification removed. If they signed, the adults would cease to be legal persons. They would become livestock, assets. Things that could be moved. Voss watched Lucian's eyes track the invisible red warning. The Marshal did not blink. He simply held the scroll out, his arm steady as iron.
You hesitate? Fear of the debt? Or fear of what it costs to pay?
Lucian stepped forward. He took the scroll from Voss's hand. His fingers brushed the wax seal, cold and hard.
It costs everything. You classify my people as equipment. You strip their name, their lineage, their right to stand in the sun. That is not a contract, Marshal. It is an erasure. Names are irrelevant in the ledger, survival is not. Your citizens are starving. Their children are turning to ash in their sleep. I offer them 30 days of life. For the price of their future offspring. Is that a bad trade? Or is your pride more expensive than your blood?
Lucian looked past Voss, toward the wagons. He could hear the murmurs of the Republic's mercenaries, men who did not care about debt or honor, only silver and land. They were watching Lucian, waiting for him to break, to sign, to admit that Ashfall was finished.
If I refuse, you take it by force. We are polite people, Lucian. We offer terms. If you refuse, well, the midnight march is waiting for no one, and neither is hunger.
Lucian rolled the scroll shut. He did not tear it. He did not burn it. Instead, he walked to the edge of the rampart, looking down at the poisoned river below. The Blackwater mill turned its broken wheel with a groan, grinding nothing but silence.
There is an old custom before the Republic wrote its own laws. Before your ledger mages decided that people were numbers. In Ashfall, when a debt was too great to pay in coin, we paid in blood and bond.
Voss frowned slightly.
I am unaware of such a custom. The Republic does not recognize archaic practices. The Republic recognizes power.
He turned back to face Voss.
And Ashfall has plenty of that. Specifically, the power of the harvest. We may be dying, but the soil beneath Cinderkeep is rich with black glass dust. It kills anything that grows there quickly, but if harvested at the precise moment of the moon's nadir, it becomes a fuel, a potent one.
Voss laughed, a short, sharp bark of sound.
You think you can sell me ash? I have mountains of grain. I have no need for your cursed dirt. Not dirt.
He pulled Starless Oath from his belt. The blade was dull, etched with faint, glowing lines that pulsed in time with the crown on his brow. Fuel for the fire that burns the midnight march back to the border. For 1 hour. Just 1 hour of safe passage. Enough to escape the valley. Voss shook his head.
Absurd. The march is a curse, not a wind. No fire can push it back. Your soldiers fear it.
He watched Voss's eyes flicker to the mercenaries behind him. They were shifting their weight, hands drifting toward their weapon hilts. They felt it too, the pressure in the air, the promise of the curse tightening its grip. They are paid to protect you from the raiders you hired to secure this claim. But if they die, who protects you? Or do you intend to walk into the march yourself? Voss stiffened. His hand tightened on his sword hilt. You are bluffing, am I? Lucian sheathed starless oath. The metal clicked, loud in the quiet wind. I offer a counter-covenant. You take the ash as payment for your grain, but you must defend the harvest site until the contract is fulfilled. If you refuse, I let the debt stand, and I walk into the march at midnight, and my death will trigger the final collapse of Cinderkeep. Every ounce of energy stored in the black glass veins below us will release at once. The shockwave will level this camp. It will level Ashfall, and it will scatter your mercenaries to the winds. Silence stretched between them. The wind scratched against the stone. Voss's face remained impassive, but his eyes narrowed. He was calculating. Lucian could see the gears turning behind the marshal's gaze, to protect a harvest that may not exist. I propose a trade, Lucian corrected. Grain for protection, ash for fuel. You get 30 days of food for your men. We get 1 hour of safety to evacuate our children. If you refuse, we all die. If you accept, we both live. Voss stared at him for a long moment. Then he smiled. It was a predatory smile, thin and sharp.
I think that you are desperate. Your republic is weak. Your treasury is empty. You need Ashfall's mines more than your men need bread. So here is my final offer. Sign the counter-covenant. We harvest the ash together. You guard the perimeter. If the raiders come, they break against your wall. If they do not, you take your grain and leave us alone.
Voss tilted his head.
And if the ash fails, if there is no fuel, then I die, and you take your losses.
But if it works, you get a foot. Voss's grin widened, revealing teeth that looked too sharp for a man standing so casually in the shadow of a dying kingdom. A foothold, he repeated, savoring the word like fine wine. How very strategic of you, cousin. You offer me a gamble, and I am always fond of a favorable odd. He took the scroll Lucian had held out. His gloved fingers traced the wax seal, then snapped it with a decisive crack. The sound echoed off the damp stone walls, sharp as a breaking bone.
It is settled. The Iron Tithe Republic accepts Ashfall's harvest in lieu of debt repayment. We will protect your fields, Lucian. You have our word.
Lucian did not relax. He watched Voss's thumb press into the wax, sealing the new terms with a cold, deliberate pressure.
And my people?
Lucian asked.
The children? They remain free, for now until the contract is fulfilled. Do not mistake patience for mercy. If that ash yields nothing, if you delay us an hour past the moon's nadir, we take the children anyway. And we burn your house to the ground.
Lucian stepped back, putting distance between himself and the marshal. He could feel the weight of starless oath against his hip, a dull reminder of the promise he had just made. But it was the only move left on the board.
Then we have an accord.
He bowed, shallow and stiff.
Welcome to Ashfall, Marshal. Try not to break anything. The walls are tired.
Voss turned on his heel, his cape sweeping around him like a wave of crimson silk. Marshal Dren Voss does not break things. He collects them. He barked an order in a language Lucian did not recognize. The mercenaries behind him shifted, forming a tight perimeter around the wagons. Lucian watched them set up camp. He turned away from the gate and walked back toward the palace. The air was heavier now, charged with the static of the approaching curse. He could feel the midnight march pressing against the borders of Ashfall, a silent, invisible tide waiting to drown them all. That was all he had left. Inside the Sun Court, the mood had shifted. The nobles who had laughed at the auction were gone, retreated into their estates, or hidden in the shadows of the city. Only Lucian and his handful of remaining servants remained. They watched him with eyes full of fear and confusion. Lucian stood before the grand table where the auction had taken place. On it lay the cracked ivory ring he had won with a single copper coin. It sat next to Starless Oath, its blade still recording the weight of his promise. Covenant Duel initiated the system's voice was not a sound. It was a vibration in his teeth, a cold spike behind his eyes. He looked down at the table and saw the text overlaying reality. The words glowed in pale blue, stark against the dark wood of the table. Hostile contract detected, personhood classification removed, clause reversal available, payment earns protection. Lucian stared at the reversal clause. It pulsed slowly, like a heartbeat. He reached out and touched it. The moment his finger made contact, the text shifted. The red warning of personhood classification removed faded, replaced by a new line in green. Counter-covenant accepted. The protector becomes the protected. He let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. It worked. The system had caught the loophole. Voss had signed to protect the harvest, but the act of protecting the harvest bound his forces to the land itself. They were no longer just mercenaries. They were part of the defense perimeter of Cinderkeep. Lucian. He looked up. Kalen stood in the doorway, his face pale, his hands trembling slightly. Behind him, the rest of the 23 children waited, huddled together like frightened birds.
What happened out there? The soldiers. They're setting up tents. Near the mill. They're staying.
Lucian said. His voice was steady, though his heart hammered against his ribs.
For now.
For now? Kalen stepped into the room. Lucian, what did you promise them? The elders say it's a trap. They say Voss wants our blood for his rituals. Lucian picked up the cracked ivory ring. It was cold in his hand.
I promised him grain and protection in exchange for 30 days of food for your families.
Kalen blinked.
You gave them Ashfall's future? The mines? The black glass? Not yet.
He slipped the ring onto his finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been waiting for him. Not until we prove that Ashfall has something worth taking. Until then, they are ours to defend. Defend? Kalen's voice rose. Lucian, we have 7 fighters. 7. Against 300 mercenaries and a curse that turns adults to ash. You can't fight them. You can't even feed them. Lucian walked around the table and placed his hand on Kalen's shoulder. The boy flinched but did not pull away. We don't fight them, Kalen. We use them. Voss thinks he's buying a debt. He doesn't know he's bought a tomb. When the midnight march, Kalen, look at me. Lucian held the boy's gaze, forcing him to ignore the trembling of his hands. Do you know what happens when a man sells his daughter to pay for bread? He eats for a week. Then he starves because there is no one left to farm the fields. Voss thinks he is buying livestock. I am selling him a fortress. A fortress? Kalen's voice cracked.
With whom? The ghosts? We have 7 fighters, Lucian. 7, and half of them are bleeding from the throat cough. Voss has 300 men.
Tapping the table, where the contract lay sealed in red wax.
300 men who think they are standing on foreign soil. 300 men who believe their paymaster owns the ground beneath their boots.
That is not a defense. That is a target. Kalen took a step back, his eyes wide with panic. If the raiders come, if the midnight march breaks? The march will not break tonight, Lucian interrupted, and the raiders are already here. Look out the window. Are they watching us? Or are they watching each other? Kalen hesitated, then crept toward the arched window. He pressed his face against the cold glass.
They're drinking, Lucian. They're sharing their rations with the millers' wives. They think we're grateful. Good. Gratitude is a heavy chain. Let them wear it while they sleep. Go to the children, Kalen. Tell them to pack light. We are moving to Cinderkeep tonight.
Cinderkeep? Kalen spun around, horror dawning on his face. That's where the adults turned to ash. That's where the King of Ash died. The King of Ash is sleeping under our feet, Lucian corrected. And he owes us rent. Pack your things. Now. The streets of Ashfall were silent, save for the clatter of boots and the distant rhythmic chanting of the Iron-Tithe mercenaries setting up camp. The smell of wet ash hung thick in the air, cloying and sweet like rotting fruit. Lucian walked with starless oath drawn loosely at his side, its blade humming faintly against his thigh. The metal was cold, colder than the night air. Behind him, a group of citizens emerged from their hovels, faces masked by scarves and shadows. They watched him with a mixture of awe and terror. One man, Elric the miller, stepped forward, his hands stained black with coal dust.
Prince Lucian,
His voice rough.
they say we must leave our homes, that Cinderkeep is death.
Cinderkeep is safety. Your homes are on the border of the march. Once the moon hits its nadir, the walls of ash will close in. You will be inside them when it happens. I will not allow that.
But our possessions, a woman cried out from the back of the group. My husband's tools, my children's books, we cannot leave them. Lucian stopped. He turned to face them, his expression hardening. The weight of the crown on his head felt like lead, pulling his shoulders down.
You can carry what fits in your hands. Everything else is fuel. You burn it for warmth tonight. Tomorrow, you may need it to light the way out. Out? Where do we go? The border curse. The system has given me a path.
Lucian said.
Trust me, Elric. For once in your life, trust the man who sold himself to save you.
Elric stared at him for a long moment. Then, slowly, he nodded. For the children, he muttered. He turned and ran back toward his mill. Lucian continued walking. The air grew colder as he approached the base of Cinderkeep. The massive black glass walls rose before him, jagged and imposing, swallowing the moonlight. At its entrance, a group of iron-tithe mercenaries stood guard, spears crossed in an X. Their leader, a tall man with a scar running down his cheek, stepped forward. Halt, the mercenary grunted.
This area is under Republic jurisdiction. I am the ruler of Ashfall,
His voice flat.
and I am entering my own home.
The mercenary laughed, a harsh, barking sound. Your home? This is a tomb, little prince, and you are just another corpse waiting to rot. Turn back, or we will drag you out by your hair. Lucian looked at the scarred man, then past him to the dark maw of the fortress entrance. But the system's voice whispered in his ear, calm and detached. Clause reversal active. The protector becomes the protected. Effect. Hostile intent toward Cinderkeep is reclassified as self-preservation. Lucian smiled. It was a thin, sharp thing. You are under contract to protect the harvest site, he said. Cinderkeep is the harvest site. Therefore, you are protecting me. The mercenary blinked. He looked at his comrades, confusion rippling through their ranks.
What? Check your papers. Or do you prefer to die with them unread?
The mercenary patted his tunic, pulling. The air in the Sun Court's auction hall still tasted of copper and stale wine, but Lucian Vale had long since left that gilded cage behind. He stood now on the cracked stone of Ashfall's outer gate, the wind biting at his face with a coldness that felt entirely different from the climate-controlled sterility of Earth. Here, the cold was alive. It clung to the skin like ash, heavy and suffocating. 29 days. The number burned in his mind, not as a threat, but as a contract term he could not afford to ignore. He had paid 1 copper coin for this kingdom, 1 penny for ruin. Now, he held the cracked ivory ring of the royal crown in his gloved hand, feeling its cold weight against his palm. It was not gold. It was bone, or something like it.
Your Highness?
Seraphine Dusk said, her voice rough like gravel under boots. She stood 10 paces away, hands resting on the hilt of a rusted sword that looked more like a relic than a weapon. Her armor was patched leather and scavenged chainmail, stripped from men who no longer wore it because they were no longer there to wear it. The scouts report movement in the lower tunnels. Blackwater Mill. They're coming up. Lucian did not turn. He watched the sky darken. The sun was setting, bleeding red across the horizon, painting the clouds in bruises of purple and black. The ash began to fall immediately, fine and gray, drifting down from nowhere and everywhere at once. It coated the stones, the walls, the shoulders of the few people huddled near the gatehouses.
Movement?
Keeping his voice level. He was a mediator in his past life. He knew how to hold space for anger without absorbing it. Specifics. Seraphine shifted her weight, the leather of her gauntlets creaking. Raiders, hired guns. They moved fast through the flood tunnels. The mercenaries we bought are spooked. They didn't sign up for a siege. They signed up for guarding grain that's already half-rotted. And you? I'm here, she said bluntly. I don't care about the grain. I care that if those tunnels open, they pour into the market square. There are 300 families down there. Families who don't know why we're afraid of the dark. Lucian finally turned to look at her. Her eyes were hard, dark circles under them from days without sleep. She was suspicious of him, certainly, every one of them was. But suspicion was a currency he could trade on. It meant they believed he had power, even if that power was just desperation and a system in his head that no one else could see. Kingdom Covenant system activated. The text appeared in his vision, translucent blue letters hovering over the falling ash. Lucian blinked, but the interface remained locked to his sight. He focused on it, and the display expanded, pulling data from the very stone beneath his feet. Population condition: hunger 91%, fear 96%, trust in crown 0%, curse pressure critical, local resources grain, low, iron, scrap, water, toxic.
Lucian,
Using his first name without honorific. It was a test.
what are you doing? The gate won't hold if they bring battering rams.
I am reading the terms.
He reached out and touched the cold stone of the gate wall. It vibrated beneath his fingertips, a low hum that traveled up his arm.
The system is showing me something. The raiders aren't just attacking us. They're testing the perimeter. They want to see if the crown bearer still has teeth. And do you? I have contracts.
He looked at the text again, scrolling through the hidden clauses of his new reality. And collateral. Royal collateral clause available. Condition: if covenant protection fails, crown bearer forfeits 1 year of life per casualty. Lucian felt the weight of it settle in his chest. 1 year for every death. It was a steep price. A tyrant would demand others pay. A fool would ignore it. Lucian Vale was neither. He was a negotiator, and he knew when to bet big.
Seraphine.
Turning fully to face her now. The ash was thicker here, swirling around their boots. I need you to take the 7 fighters who stayed loyal. Take the mercenaries too, not to fight outside the walls, to hold the interior choke points. If they break in, they don't get past the second archway. Seraphine frowned, her eyes narrowing. You're sending them into a kill box? I'm giving them a covenant, Lucian corrected. He stepped closer, invading her personal space just enough to be intimidating, not aggressive.
A verbal agreement. Legally binding under the laws of Ashfall. If they hold the line, their families in the square are guaranteed protection until dawn. If they break rank, they lose that guarantee. That's blackmail. It's risk management. The curse reacts to broken faith, Seraphine. It has been eating us because we abandoned each other for generations. This might be the first time we choose not to.
He raised his hand, and the system responded. A glowing seal formed in the air between them, shifting and locking into place. Covenant proposal. Those who protect Ashfall shall not die alone. Seraphine stared at the light. Her jaw tight.
You expect them to sign their lives away for a glowing promise? I expect them to choose survival.
He did not blink.
The mercenaries are already bound by their contract with you. You just need to clarify the terms. If they hold the line, their families eat. If they run, the curse takes them anyway. That is a choice.
Seraphine exhaled sharply through her nose. She looked past Lucian, toward the darkening mouth of the tunnel where shadows began to stretch and twist.
And you? What do you get for betting your own life on this? Stability. One kingdom that doesn't collapse in the first week. That sounds like business, not loyalty.
It is both. Lucian turned his head slightly, watching a group of terrified civilians huddle near the gatehouse. Ash clung to their hair, their eyelashes, their clothes. They looked less like people and more like statues carved from gray dust. Look at them, Seraphine. Really look. The curse isn't just killing them. It's waiting for them to give up. Every time someone believes they are alone, the ash gets heavier. Seraphine followed his gaze. She didn't soften. Her face remained a mask of hardened pragmatism.
I'll take your covenant. But if this fails, Lucian, I won't be here to pick up the pieces. I know. You will be dead.
The silence between them was heavy, filled only by the distant wet sound of water rushing through the tunnel ahead and the soft, incessant patter of falling ash.
Then let's hope I am wrong.
She turned on her heel, her boots scraping against the stone. 7 fighters, now, and get those mercenaries moving before they change their minds. She marched toward the lower gate, barking orders to the few soldiers who remained standing. Her voice cut through the gloom, sharp and clear. You. Form a shield wall at the second archway. You 3. Check the grain silos for traps. If you hear fighting, you run in. You do not hesitate. One of the mercenaries, a broad-shouldered man with a scar running down his cheek, hesitated. He looked at Lucian, then back at Seraphine.
What's the deal? We die if we stay. Stay and you might live. Run and you die alone in the dark. That's the covenant.
It was a gesture of dismissal, but also of fear. He nodded once, jerking his head toward his companions. Move out. Lucian watched them go. The blue text in his vision shifted again, updating the status of the population. Population condition: hunger 91%, they veer 85%, trust in crown 2%, covenant active, those who protect Ashfall shall not die alone. Status, pending acceptance. The trust metric had barely moved. It was a start, but it was fragile. He could feel the curse pressing against his mind, a cold, suffocating weight that sought to exploit. Every doubt, every hesitation. He needed more than mercenaries. He needed the citizens themselves to understand what was at stake. Not just survival, but agency. Lucian walked toward the crowd near the gatehouse. The ash was thicker here, coating his black coat in a layer of gray dust. He stopped 10 paces from the largest group of civilians. They were huddled together, men and women clutching whatever belongings they had saved. Their eyes were wide, fixed on the tunnel entrance with a mixture of horror and resignation. Lucian, one of the women, whispered. Her name was Ilara. Lucian knew because the system had provided names in his peripheral vision, like labels on ingredients in a grocery store.
Is it true? Are they coming? Yes.
His voice was calm, steady. He projected confidence he did not feel. Raiders from the Blackwater Mill. They want what is left of this town. What can we do? Another man asked. He was holding a child tightly against his chest. The child's face was buried in the man's coat, hidden from view.
We have no weapons. You have each other.
He looked directly at Ilara.
Ilara, what is your name on the census?
She blinked, confused by the question.
Ilara Vance. Why do you ask? Because the curse knows it.
The ash does not fall randomly. It falls where faith has broken, where people believe they are forgotten. You are not forgotten, that's pretty, but it doesn't stop blades. No.
Lucian agreed.
But it stops the curse from taking your soul while your body lives. I can offer you a choice. You can hide in the cellars and wait to be found. Or you can stand with Seraphine's fighters and hold the line.
DI? The man with the child asked. His voice cracked.
We are farmers, not soldiers. Then stand behind them, give your strength to their shields.
Give your voice to their morale. If you break faith, if you abandon this town in its hour of need, the ash will claim you anyway. But if you hold together, you create. The man with the child tightened his grip on the boy's shoulders, pulling him closer as if he could shield him from the very air they breathed.
We have no strength left to give.
Her voice thin and brittle.
We spent it running when your father fled. We spent it hoping when the grain stores emptied. What do you want us to be, Your Highness? Brave?
I want you to be free.
He did not move closer. He let the distance speak for him, the physical space between ruler and subject, mirroring the chasm of trust that needed to be bridged. Freedom is not just the absence of chains, Ilara. It is the presence of choice, and tonight you have one. The mercenary leader, a man named Kale, who had lingered at the edge of the crowd watching with cold calculation, stepped forward. His hand rested on the pommel of his sword, fingers drumming a slow, impatient rhythm against the leather hilt.
Time is a luxury you cannot afford. Vale.
His voice was rough, like gravel grinding under boot heels.
The shadows are moving in the tunnel. I can hear them breathing. If they break the gate, your pretty speech will be ash before it hits the ground.
Lucian turned his head slightly, his eyes locking with Kale's. The system text flickered at the edge of his vision, a warning pulse against the encroaching dark. Population condition, fear 89%. It was rising, fast.
Then let them come.
He looked back to Ilara.
Do not agree to die for me, Ilara. Agree to live with your neighbors. That is the only covenant that matters.
Her eyes darted to her husband, who was shaking visibly now, his knuckles white where he gripped the railing of their makeshift shelter. She looked back at Lucian, searching his face for deception, for the lie that always seemed to accompany promises in Ashfall. I don't trust you, she said finally. It wasn't a refusal. It was a statement of fact.
Good. Trust is earned. Fear is inherited. Choose the fear, or choose me, but choose now.
A scream tore through the air from deeper within the town, far beyond the gatehouse. It was cut short by the wet thud of impact and the crunch of stone. The ground vibrated beneath their feet, a low rumble that traveled up through the soles of Lucian's boots and into his bones.
First breach. They're inside the lower ward.
Lucian felt the system flare, hot and angry in his mind. Warning. Perimeter integrity compromised. The ash around him swirled violently, forming shapes that looked like grasping hands, pulling at his coat, his skin, his will. It was testing him. Testing them. What do we do? The man with the child asked, his voice rising in panic.
We're trapped. You are not trapped.
His voice hardening into something steel-sharp.
You are anchored, Ilara. You take the families to the central square. Now, if the gate falls, Seraphine's fighters will be holding the line there. You give them your voices. You shout their names. You remind them why they fight.
Ilara stared at him.
And if they lose, then I die.
He met her gaze without flinching.
And Ashfall dies with us. Is that the end you want? Or is there one breath of hope left in this city that hasn't been extinguished by apathy?
A harsh, barking sound.
Hope doesn't stop arrows, Your Highness. Steel does, and we're short on both.
Seraphine has the steel.
I am providing the reason to hold it.
He turned to Kale.
You will stay at the gate with me. If I give the order to flee, you run. You take your men and you run. But if I do not, you die here. That is my contract with you.
Kale spat again, this time closer to Lucian's boots. You're mad. A noble in black robes talking to ghosts while the world burns. I am a crown-bearer, Lucian corrected. He raised his hand, and the air between him and Kale shimmered with a faint golden light. Covenant proposal, the shield and the king share the burden. Do you accept? Kale looked at the light, then at the darkening tunnel where the sounds of war were growing louder. He drew his sword halfway, the blade catching the dim light.
It buys you a kingdom or a grave. Pick your side.
Kale stared at him for a long moment, then, with a curse that sounded like a prayer, he sheathed his sword and stepped up beside Lucian. 1 hour. Not 1 minute more. From the direction of the lower ward, the sound of clashing metal echoed against the stone walls. Screams followed, short and sharp.
They're breaching the outer gate.
Seraphine's voice called out from the darkness behind them. She emerged from the shadows, her armor scarred, her face smeared with ash and blood. 7 are down. The mercenaries are holding the second archway, but they're slipping. They need pressure on the flank. Lucian looked at the text hovering in his mind. Seraphine did not wait for an answer. She turned on her heel, the hem of her cloak whipping against Lucian's shin as she scrambled back toward the chaos. Hold the line! If they break this gate, they break us! Fight with your lives! Kale stepped forward, his sword drawn, the steel singing a low note in the heavy air. They're pouring out like rats, he shouted over the rising clamor of clashing metal. We can't hold them all, Vale. The mercenaries are cracking. Ilara, gather them. Ilara Vance looked up from her husband's trembling shoulder. Her face was pale, stripped of color by the terror that gripped the crowd. What do I do? She cried out, her voice small against the roar of the approaching horde. You speak! Lucian commanded, his voice projecting with a force that made the air around him shiver. You tell them their names. You tell them they are not alone. He turned back to the tunnel as the first wave of raiders emerged from the darkness. They were ragged men and women, their eyes hollow, their skin cracked and dusted with the same gray ash that coated Lucian's coat. They moved with a desperate feral speed, driven by hunger and the cold logic of survival. Kale raised his sword, pointing it at the oncoming swarm. Get behind me! He roared to the few remaining guards near the gate. Form the shield wall. The guards hesitated, their eyes wide with fear. One of them, a young man named Oren, lowered his spear slightly.
There's too many.
His voice trembling.
We're dead. We're all going to die here. Not if you listen to me.
Lucian said. He stepped forward, placing himself directly in the path of the raiders' advance. The system flared in his mind, a cold, analytical pulse against the heat of the battle. Kingdom Covenant system activated. Text scrolled across his vision, overlaying the horror of the scene with clinical precision. Emergency royal clause available. A ruler may swear first. Population condition, hunger 91%, fear 96%, trust in crown. Covenant proposal. Those who protect Ashfall shall not die alone. Warning. Consent compromised. This covenant may become corrupted. Lucian. Ilara screamed from the crowd.
Come back. You'll be killed. I know.
He did not look at her. He looked at the raiders, then at Seraphine, who was fighting with a ferocity that defied her exhaustion. He looked at Kale, who was holding the line against the tide. But I am the crown bearer. The burden is mine to carry. He raised his hand, palm open toward the sky. The ash around him swirled violently, coalescing into a spiral of gray dust that reflected the dying light of the sunset.
I swear.
His voice ringing out with a clarity that silenced the immediate battle for a heartbeat. I swear by this crown and this city, If any citizen holds this line, if any soul defends Ashfall from the darkness, I will not let them fall into the void alone. I will share their burden until my last breath. The system screamed in his mind, a jagged pain that lanced through his temples. Warning, high-risk clause detected. Royal authority strain critical. Kale stared at Lucian, his sword arm trembling. "What did you do?" he shouted over the sudden stillness. He could feel the ash pulling at his skin, trying to draw out his life force. It was hungry for the power he had invoked, and I gave them something they haven't had in centuries: proof. The raiders hesitated. Their feral charges slowed as they sensed a shift in the air. The ash on their skin began to flake away, revealing not clean flesh, but a raw, weeping redness beneath. They were not just attacking. They were reacting to the broken faith that had sustained the curse for generations. And now, Lucian was offering a new contract. Ilara took a step forward, her hand gripping her husband's arm tighter. "He's mad," she whispered. "But he's standing." Kale lowered his sword slightly, his eyes narrowing as he studied Lucian. "You're bleeding," he observed. Blood trickled from Lucian's nose, dark against the ash on his face.
I'm paying.
He wiped the blood away with the back of his hand.
For every second you hold that gate, I give a year of my life. If it fails, if any citizen dies while obeying the defense order.
The system text flashed red, bold and urgent. Royal collateral clause available. Condition: if covenant protection fails, crown bearer forfeits 1 year of life per casualty. Lucian met Kale's gaze. "I am betting my life on your loyalty. Are you willing to bet yours?" Kale looked at the raiders, then back at Lucian. He spat again, but this time it was a gesture of respect, not contempt. He slammed the pommel of his sword against the cobblestones. "Then we fight." The floodgates groaned open, spilling black water onto the dry stone floor of the mill's undercroft. Mira Quell knelt in the mud, her fingers tracing the wet letters carved into the foundation stone. Old Mother Nessa stood beside her, her knuckles white as she gripped her staff. The air smelled of ozone and old blood.
The geometry is wrong.
Wiping slime from her eyes.
The channels don't drain outward. They pull inward.
Nessa shifted her weight, the wood of her creaking against her knees. Pull? Toward what? Down. Mira pointed at the floorboards that had long since rotted away, exposing the dark throat of the earth below. "Look at the ash deposits. It's not falling here. It's being sucked out, through the crypts, under the throne." Lucian Vale stepped into the light of Mira's lantern. His coat was torn, his face pale from the effort of the battle just finished. He looked down at the inscription with the cold intensity of a man reading a contract he intended to breach. "What does it say?" Mira squinted, her breath hitching in her throat. It's a binding clause, not a curse. A containment protocol." She looked up, her eyes wide. "The midnight march isn't keeping us in. It's keeping something down there from getting out. Every death we've suffered, every soul turned to ash, it's fuel. It's being pumped into the royal crypt like oil into a furnace." Lucian froze. The lantern light flickered against his face, casting deep shadows in the hollows of his cheeks. He did not move for a long moment. Then, he closed his eyes and exhaled slowly. When he opened them, they were sharp, calculating.
"House Vale, we are not the rulers of this place. No.
Her voice was dry as parchment.
We are the battery."
Lucian turned to her. Explain. Nessa leaned on her staff, looking tired in a way that had nothing to do with age.
"Every generation, the Vale Kings come here and take their seat. They think they are claiming territory. They are not. They are taking the shift. 7 founders bound an unnamed god beneath Cinderkeep. The seal weakens. It needs blood. It needs consent. The kingdom sold for 1 coin was never a sale of land. It was a refreshment of the seal."
Lucian's jaw tightened.
"He is clever. He is cruel. But he is clever."
Lucian walked closer to the edge of the pit, peering into the darkness. The system interface flickered in his vision, bright and intrusive. Original signatory identified, House Halbrecht, curse designation updated, the Midnight March is a living seal. New objective, locate the 7 founder clauses. The words burned in his mind, superimposed over the dark stone. He stared at them, feeling the shift in reality. The contract he had just signed was not a burden. It was an inheritance of monsters.
House Halbrecht.
Oren's house, one of the 7. He is one of the wardens. He stays safe while you die slowly. Until you die, and another veil takes your place, and then another, until the line ends or the god breaks loose.
Lucian straightened up. He looked at Mira, who was trembling slightly, and then at Nessa, who watched him with the steady gaze of a woman who had seen her children turn to dust before his eyes.
Is there a way out? A loophole? A clause I can exploit?
Mira shook her head.
It's not a legal document you can sue over. It's magic. Ancient, heavy magic.
Lucian walked back toward the mill's main floor, his boots splashing in the murky water. But Lucian was a mediator, a negotiator. He dealt in leverage, in impossible agreements that looked voluntary on paper. He looked at the system prompt again. Locate the 7 founder clauses.
If it's a seal,
Stopping to look back at Nessa.
Then it requires maintenance. It requires renewal. Yes, and if I change the terms of the renewal, if I rewrite the covenant.
Mira gasped.
you can't rewrite a binding spell of that age. The energy required would kill you instantly. Not if the sacrifice is voluntary.
He looked at his hands.
Forced loyalty creates tyranny. Tyranny breaks the seal, but voluntary sacrifice, that creates power. Real power. Not just enough to hold the god down, but enough to change the rules.
Nessa stared at him. For the first time, her expression shifted from weary acceptance to something else. Fear. Hope. It was hard to tell. You would ask. Nessa lifted her hand, the knuckles white around her staff, as if she were holding back a tidal wave with nothing but her will.
You would ask us to die for you? For a crown that is just a cage? I would ask us to live.
He did not step closer. He knew better than to crowd her in this moment. There is a difference. Mira wiped the mud from her cheek, leaving a streak of gray across her pale skin. He means it's a math problem, Nessa. If the seal breaks because the blood runs thin, we all go with it. The god takes the kingdom, then the world. If we force it, it tastes like ash and hate. It rejects us. But if we give it freely, if we choose to be the lock. He looked down at his hands again. They were shaking, just slightly. The adrenaline was fading, leaving only the cold calculus of survival. The covenant system is responding to intent. Mira, I can feel it. It's waiting for a contract. A true one. Nessa turned her back on him, looking out into the dark water where the ash still swirled in lazy, deadly currents.
We have given everything for 80 years. Our children, our neighbors, our memories of what sunlight felt like before the sky turned to slate. And now you come to us with a proposal? To sign our own death warrants again? Not death warrants.
His voice remained steady, though his heart hammered against his ribs. Pledges. Voluntary covenants. 1 person at a time. 100 at a time. If the system accepts them, it stabilizes the seal without the violent feedback loop that kills the ruler in the throne room. I don't want to be the battery, Nessa. I want to be the manager. She laughed then, a dry, rattling sound that echoed off the wet stone walls.
You think you can manage a god? I think I can negotiate with it. I think I can convince your people that their sacrifice is not a sentence, but a choice. And choices have value.
Mira stepped forward, her lantern casting long, dancing shadows against the foundation stones. If we make it active, if we frame it as an alliance, the power output might be different. Higher. Clean. Nessa finally turned back to face him. Her eyes were hard, unyielding flint. And what do you give us in return? What leverage do you have that makes this worth taking? Lucian looked at her, then at Mira, then down into the dark throat of the crypt below them. He saw the faint red glow pulsing from the depths, the heartbeat of the thing beneath Cinderkeep. He thought of Oren's smile, of the cold copper coin in his pocket, of the weight of the crown he had, accepted without question.
I give you Ashfall. Not as a prisoner cell, as a kingdom. I will rebuild the walls. I will clear the skies. I will make sure that when you stand here and look down, you see the foundation, not the fear. And if I fail, then the seal breaks anyway, and we all die together.
Nessa studied his face for a long moment. The air between them was thick with the smell of ozone and old blood. Then, slowly, she lowered her staff. It struck the stone with a dull thud that sounded like a gavel.
We have no choice. Not really, I know, but you will choose it. That is the contract.
Mira grinned, sharp and bright in the gloom. All right then, how do we start? Do we need forms? Legal templates? Because I brought a quill. Lucian almost smiled. It was a small thing, fragile as glass, but it was there. He looked toward the throne room below, where the knocking had grown louder, more insistent. Something was waking up. Something that knew its cage was being restructured.
We start with a name, and then we start with the first free will.
He turned back to the inscription on the floor, the wet letters gleaming in the lantern light. The system prompt hovered again, urgent and demanding. New objective. Locate the 7 founder clauses. Warning. Seal integrity critical.
House Halbrecht.
He couldn't just watch. He would interfere. Lucian felt the cold shift of determination settle in his chest. He was no longer just surviving. He was planning. And for the first time since he had woken up in that auction hall, wearing a prisoner's coat and holding a single copper coin, he felt like he held the upper hand. "Show me the other clauses, Mira," he said.
The ones that are still hidden.
Mira knelt back down, her fingers tracing the stone with renewed vigor.
If I follow the energy lines, yes. There's another inscription here, smaller, deeper. It mentions the first blood and the last breath. Specific. Good.
Specificity is in force. Mira scraped her fingernail into a crack in the stone, sending up a tiny puff of dust that smelled like dried lavender and grave dirt. Specificity is enforceable, she repeated, her voice tight with the thrill of discovery. She didn't look up. Her fingers were moving too fast, tracing lines that shouldn't exist in solid rock. But these aren't just clauses. They're signatures. Look here. The ink isn't ink. It's dried blood from a different dynasty. Lucian leaned over her shoulder, the scent of ozone making his eyes water. He squinted at the faint reddish-brown scrawl beneath Mira's fingers. It wasn't part of the main covenant. It was smaller, hidden in the grooves where 2 stones met. Nessa shifted her weight, the wood of her staff creaking against the wet floor. She hadn't moved closer, but her presence was a physical pressure in the room. Oren knew, she said. Her voice was flat, devoid of surprise. It sounded like a stone dropping into a well. That Ashfall wasn't being punished, Nessa corrected. She pointed her staff at the dark water churning in the mill's center. That it was being fed. The auction wasn't an abandonment, Lucian Vale. It was a maintenance schedule. Mira stopped tracing. She looked up, her face pale in the lantern light. "What are you saying?"
I'm saying that every 80 years, when the seal weakens and the god starts to itch,
Nessa said, her eyes locking onto Lucian's.
the crown must be refreshed. A new veil. Someone with the blood of the binders in their veins. Oren didn't sell you this kingdom to hurt you. He sold it because he had to. The seal was failing. If no veil took the throne, the god would have broken free decades ago.
Lucian felt a cold knot form in his stomach. He looked down at the black coat he wore, the fabric rough and cheap.
Oren knew I was the last veil.
Lucian said.
Because you are a good boy.
Her tone sharp.
And your cousin is a patient monster.
Mira stood up, brushing dust from her knees. She looked angry now, not just frightened.
So we're not victims? We're batteries? For a contract my grandfather didn't even know existed? You are the locks.
She reached out and touched the iron ring on the bell rope hanging from the ceiling. The metal was cold, untouched by rust despite the dampness of the room. And locks must hold, even if they have to turn to ash to do it. Lucian looked at the system prompt hovering in his peripheral vision. It had changed. The text was no longer just warning him. It was listing names. One name glowed with a faint golden light among a dozen others that were grayed out and inert. Original signatory identified House Halbrecht. Curse designation updated. The Midnight March is a living seal.
It's not a punishment.
Reading the system output aloud, he looked at Mira, then at Nessa.
The Midnight March isn't keeping us in. It's keeping something down. We thought we were prisoners. We're actually the cage.
Nessa nodded once, and cages require keepers. That was the bargain. The 7 founders bound the god. The veils provide the blood. The people provide the ash. A tripartite agreement. Simple in theory, terrible in practice. Lucian walked to the edge of the platform, looking down into the churning black water below. He could feel a vibration coming from beneath his feet, a low hum that matched the pulsing red light he'd seen earlier. It wasn't just magic, it was intent. Something was aware of him. Something was waiting for the contract to be signed.
If it's a contract,
Turning back to them,
then it can be renegotiated.
Mira blinked.
You don't renegotiate with a god, Lucian. You survive it. I don't plan on surviving it by dying.
He pulled the cracked ivory ring from his pocket. It felt heavy, heavier than a piece of jewelry should. Oren thinks he has me trapped. He thinks because I have the blood, I have to play the part. But the covenant system, it doesn't care about bloodline. It cares about intent, about agreement. Nessa's eyes narrowed.
And what agreement do you propose? That we stop dying? That we choose to die?
The words hung in the air, heavy and dangerous.
If the seal breaks because the sacrifice is forced, the energy is unstable.
It burns out the ruler. But if the sacrifice is voluntary, if it's a covenant freely given, the system says that generates more power.
Clean power. Stable power.
Mira stared at him. Her mouth opened, then closed.
You're talking about mass suicide. I'm talking about a merger.
He held up the ring.
The current model is inefficient.
It wastes life. It breeds resentment. Resentment. Lucian felt the weight of the ring dig into his palm, a sharp anchor in the swirling mist. He looked at Mira, who stood rigid, her knuckles white where she gripped her staff like a weapon against the absurdity of his words. Nessa leaned on her cane, her eyes old and tired, watching him with the detachment of someone who had seen this script before and knew how badly it always ended.
You think you can sign a treaty with a hunger?
Her voice was low, trembling not with fear but with rage.
You think because you speak in contracts, the Dark will respect the paperwork?
I think the system responds to agency.
He stepped closer to the edge of the platform, peering into the black water. The hum beneath his boots had risen in pitch, becoming a whine that vibrated in his teeth. Forced loyalty breeds tyranny. Forced death breeds resentment. Resentment is structural weakness. Voluntary covenant, that's leverage. Nessa tapped her staff on the stone. Click, click. The sound was dry, final.
Leverage requires an audience. You have none, boy. We are ash. Ash does not bargain. It falls. Then we stop falling.
He turned back to them, the cracked ivory ring glinting in the dim light. Oren brought me here because he needed a battery, a fresh line of Vale blood to plug the leaks in the seal. He expects me to scream, to resist, to fail. That failure is what keeps the cycle going. If I accept the role of martyr, I confirm his design. Mira shook her head, stepping back as if Lucian had just drawn a blade.
If you refuse the sacrifice, the god wakes. It breaks out. It eats us. All of us. Not just the ones who would die for a cause. Everyone. That is the threat. Threats are negotiable. Oren threatens total annihilation to ensure compliance. But I have read his face.
He is afraid, not of the god, but of losing control of it. If the seal breaks, he loses his prize. He loses Ashfall.
He loses the leverage he has held for 80 years.
Lucian pointed the ring toward the darkness below. So here is the counteroffer. I will not force you to die. I will ask you to stay, to live, and in exchange I will use my blood, my name, and every ounce of influence this cursed crown holds to reinforce the seal from the inside. Not as a victim, as a partner. Nessa laughed. It was a short, barking sound that echoed off the wet walls.
Partner? With what? You are one man in a black coat, surrounded by water and ghosts. Your blood will dilute. Your name will be forgotten within a generation. The god is eternal. You are transient. Exactly. Because I am transient, I have nothing to lose but my life, which is already forfeit if Oren's plan succeeds.
But you have everything to lose. And that makes you valuable. The system recognizes value. It recognizes consent. If the people of Ashfall choose to remain, not out of fear of death, but out of choice to
live under my protection, the seal strengthens. Because it is no longer a prison, it is a home.
Mira stared at him, her eyes wide. You're trying to unionize the damned, she whispered, against an eldritch horror. I'm trying to turn a resource into a citizenry, Lucian corrected. There is a difference. One is extraction. The other is governance. Nessa pushed herself upright, her joints popping audibly in the silence. She walked slowly toward Lucian, her steps heavy on the wet stone. She stopped inches from him, looking up with eyes that had seen centuries of despair. And if we refuse, she asked, if we choose to let it end, if we decide that Ash is better than this, whatever it is you're promising, Lucian held her gaze. He did not blink. Then I die, and the god takes Ashfall. But until that moment, I offer you a choice. The first free choice your families have had in 300 years. Stay with me, and we find another way. Run or die, if you must. But do not tell me it cannot be done. The air in the mill shifted. The smell of ozone spiked, burning the nostrils. Below them, the water churned violently. throwing up sprays of black sludge that hissed as they hit the stone. The knocking from the throne room grew louder, frantic now. Something was pounding against the other side of reality, testing the boundaries Lucian had just tried to redefine. Alert. Seal integrity fluctuating. Input required. Will of the sovereign. The system prompt flashed red in his vision, urgent and demanding. Lucian ignored it. He looked at Mira. "Do you believe it's possible?" Mira swallowed hard. She looked at Nessa, then back to the ring in Lucian's hand. Her chin lifted. "I'm a scholar. I believe in evidence. And right now your theory is the only one that doesn't end with us being soup." Nessa sighed, a long, weary exhalation that seemed to deflate her entire frame. She reached out and took Lucian's hand, turning his palm over to look at the ring. Her skin was rough, like parchment, but her grip was strong.
Oren sends you to break the seal. You try to mend it with words.
"You are either very..." The air in the deep vault did not smell of decay, but of ozone and old blood. Lucian Vale descended the spiral stairs alone, his black prisoner's coat dragging against the stone steps. The weight of the cracked ivory ring on his finger was the only thing anchoring him to reality. Above him, the auction hall of the Sun Court faded into memory, replaced by the oppressive silence of Cinderkeep's foundation. He had paid 1 copper coin for a kingdom that wanted him dead. Now he stood at the bottom of a well dug centuries ago, looking up at nothing but darkness. He reached the landing. Before him lay the god prison, a colossal heart of black glass, pulsing with a faint, sickly violet light. 7 chains wrapped around it, each link thick as a tree trunk, engraved with runes that hurt his eyes to read. Lucian stepped closer, his boots clicking on the obsidian floor. The system in his head remained silent, offering no guidance, no soldiers, no gold. Just him and the contract he was about to sign or break. A voice spoke through the stone itself, vibrating in his bones. "You have come far for a man with nothing." Lucian stopped 10 paces from the nearest chain. He did not look back. "I came for my home, and I brought my own terms." Terms. The laughter that followed was dry like parchment tearing.
You bring no army, Lucian Vale. You bring no gold. What leverage does a starving prince hold against a god? I hold the only thing you need.
Raising his hand, the signet ring glowed with a cold blue light.
My word, and my authority.
"Authority is a fiction for the living," the voice replied. The chains rattled, though no wind moved them. "You wish to break the curse? I can do it now. Snap this first link. Let me consume the Sun Court. Burn their palaces to ash, and Ashfall will be free." Lucian felt the temptation coil in his gut. It was simple, so simple it made him want to laugh. One snap, and the extinction timer would stop. No more running, no more starvation. But he remembered the merchant's eyes in the auction hall, the cruelty of the Sun Court, the ease with which they sold lives for coin. To destroy them without cause was not justice. It was just another form of tyranny.
If I break this chain, what happens to the people who didn't vote for me? They die.
The backlash will erase the Sun Court and everything within 300 miles. A continent bleeds so one kingdom may breathe. That is a catastrophic outcome, Lucian noted. He pulled up the interface in his mind, watching the warnings flash red. Warning, continental catastrophe imminent, consent of affected parties required. And I am not here to be a butcher. I am here to be a king. A king! The god's amusement deepened. You have 112 subjects who hate you. They are caged rats in a burning building. You cannot save them all, little king. Your power is too small. Lucian ignored the doubt creeping into his thoughts. He looked at the chains. Each one represented a founding covenant, a rule written in blood long ago. Forced loyalty created tyrants. Forced sacrifice created monsters. The system had warned him of this repeatedly. If Lucian forces loyalty, he becomes a tyrant. But what if they chose it? What if the contract was not imposed, but invited?
I don't need to save them all.
He turned away from the black glass heart.
I just need them to choose.
Choose what? To live with me. Not as victims. Not as sacrifices. As partners. Lucian walked back toward the stairs, his steps steady. I am making a public royal covenant. Right now. With every citizen of Ashfall.
A folly.
The voice mocked.
They will laugh at you. Let them.
He climbed the first few steps, then paused.
If they refuse, I will leave.
But if they accept, We do this together. No one dies for Ashfall's survival without their informed consent.
Including me.
There was a pause. The violet light in the glass heart pulsed harder, as if confused by the novelty of voluntary agreement. You offer them death as an option? I offer them agency, Lucian corrected. That is the difference between a master and a leader. He closed his eyes and pushed his will outward. He did not command, he asked. The system hummed, translating his intent into magical law. Emergency covenant proposed. No life in Ashfall shall be spent without a voice. The response came instantly, not from the god, but from the people. One by one, their voices echoed in the silence of his mind. Not words, but assent. A collective breath held and then released. We accept, they said as one. The chains on the black glass heart shuddered. The violet light turned gold. The system notifications flooded his vision. Consent confirmed, 112 divided 112. Royal authority, 3100. Lucian opened his eyes. He raised his glowing signet ring high above his head. Every citizen's oath answered him in the quiet of the vault. Maybe not, he said to the voice beneath the throne. But you do not get to decide which of them I throw away. Lucian lowered his hand, the blue light of his signet ring dimming to a steady pulse. The god prisoner did not speak immediately. The silence that followed was heavy, pressing against Lucian's eardrums like deep water. He kept his eyes on the black glass heart. It had stopped pulsing violently. The violet light within it had cooled, hardening into something resembling obsidian rather than sickly energy. You have changed the nature of the trap, the voice said. It was no longer mocking. It sounded curious. The curse feeds on resentment, on forced obedience. You have replaced the fuel with something volatile. A voluntary covenant is stable, Lucian said. He walked back to the edge of the dais, standing just inches from the nearest chain. He did not touch it. He knew better than to provoke a sleeping beast with physical contact. It does not drain life. It aligns wills. The people of Ashfall are no longer victims waiting for death. They are guardians choosing survival. And what do they get in return? The god asked. The chains rattled again, but this time it sounded like applause. I offered them safety. You offered them responsibility? Is that not a crueler joke? It is honesty, Lucian replied. He pulled up the system interface one last time. The numbers were still there, glowing in his peripheral vision. Royal authority, 100. Kingdom class unlocked. Covenant crown. Safety given is a cage. Safety earned is a foundation. I am building a kingdom, not a prison. The god's laughter returned, softer this time. It was the sound of tectonic plates shifting underground. A covenant crown. How poetic. Do you think gold can hold power? Gold melts. Oaths endure. I don't need gold to hold power, Lucian said. He turned his back on the heart. The stairs loomed above him, dark and cold. I have the will of 112 people who no longer fear me. That is a stronger metal than any coin in the Sun Court. You are arrogant, the voice noted. It will be your undoing. I am pragmatic, Lucian corrected. He began to climb. His legs burned from the descent, but his mind was clear. The extinction timer in the corner of his vision had vanished. In its place was a new bar, filling slowly with each step he took away from the god prison. Stability, 12%. But I am alive, and you are still bound. The chains groaned as Lucian reached the top of the spiral stairs. The air in the vault changed. The smell of ozone was gone, replaced by the damp chill of the rock above. He pushed open the heavy iron door at the landing. It groaned in protest, rusted hinges screeching against stone. He emerged into a small antechamber. Dust motes danced in the beam of light from a crack in the ceiling. A single figure stood waiting for him there. Lady Alara wore her mourning robes, though she had not worn them in weeks. Her face was pale, drawn tight by the stress of holding the remaining 10 families together. She held a lantern, its flame flickering wildly. The ground shook, she said. The bells stopped ringing. Lucian stepped into the light. He adjusted his black prisoner's coat, straightening his spine. He looked at her and nodded.
The silence is good. It means the curse is listening now, not screaming.
Ilara lowered the lantern slightly. Her eyes narrowed.
You went down there alone. The others, they felt it too. The pull, like a hook in their chests. They are still here.
He walked past her. moving toward the stairs that led up to the surface.
And they have decided something important. What have you done?
She fell into step beside him, her sandals whispering on the stone.
The Sun Court is coming.
They know we bought Ashfall. They will send collectors.
They will come for the debt. Let them come.
He did not stop walking. His voice was calm, steady. Ilara stopped in her tracks. You cannot pay them with promises, Lucian. You owe the Sun Court a kingdom that is dying. They will take what remains when we are gone. Lucian turned to face her. He raised his right hand. The signet ring glowed again, not with the cold blue of the god prison, but with a warm, gold light. It reflected in Ilara's eyes. I owe them a lesson, and I intend to collect. He stepped forward, closing the distance between them. He did not touch her. He simply let his authority bleed into the air, thick and undeniable.
Go back to the square. Gather the 12 remaining heads of households.
Tell them we are not hiding.
Tell them we are ready.
Ilara stared at him. For a moment, fear flickered in her gaze, but then it was replaced by something else. Recognition. You have bound us to you, she whispered. Not by force, by choice. He turned and continued up the stairs. That is the only binding that matters. He reached the surface level of Cinderkeep. The sky was dark, storm clouds gathering over the ruined town. Rain began to fall, cold and sharp. Lucian stood on the balcony of the keep's main hall. Below, in the courtyard, figures were emerging from the figures emerged from the doorways, shaking off the damp mist that clung to their skin. They moved slowly at first, then faster, converging on the courtyard below. Lucian watched them come. His hand remained raised, the ring burning with a steady, warm light that cut through the gloom. Ilara stepped out onto the balcony beside him, holding the lantern high so its light could be seen from the ground. They are gathering, she called down, her voice carrying over the rain.
Lucian, they are afraid. I know.
He looked at the crowd forming in the mud and stone. 112 faces looked up at him, small dots in the twilight. He did not shout. He let his voice project, amplified by the authority that now hummed beneath his skin. Look up. Look at me. A man in the front row raised a hand. It was Cale, the former blacksmith. His face was streaked with soot and rain. Prince Vale, the bells have stopped. What did you do? Lucian leaned over the railing. Promises don't stop the darkness, another voice shouted. It was Mara, the weaver. She stood shoulder to shoulder with her husband, Oren. The shadows are still there. They whisper even now. His tone was calm, analytical, but hunger can be managed. I have established a new law for Ashfall, effective immediately. Ilara gasped softly beside him. You cannot make laws here. The Sun Court owns the land. They own the curse. Then he turned back to the crowd, his voice rising above the thunder rolling in the distance. No life in Ashfall shall be spent without a voice. No sacrifice will be made without consent. If you wish to stay, you stay by choice. If you wish to leave, you leave with my blessing. But if you stay, you are not subjects. You are partners. Silence fell over the courtyard. The rain drummed harder against the stone tiles of the balcony. Lucian waited. He could feel the system watching him, waiting for the confirmation of the covenant. It had already registered the will of the people. Now it needed their public acknowledgement. Cale took a step forward. His boots squelched in the mud. Why should we trust you? You are a prisoner. You bought this death trap with a copper coin. How do we know you won't abandon us when the Sun Court comes? Lucian lowered his hand slightly, letting the light of the ring dim to a soft glow. I have nothing else. My house is gone. My title is a joke. But my word is the only currency I have left, and it is backed by the lives of every person standing in that courtyard. Oren stepped up beside Mara. He wiped rain from his eyes.
And if we stay? What does that mean? It means you are no longer victims.
It means the curse cannot take you unless you agree to give yourselves to it. It means your survival is not guaranteed by magic, but by choice. And choice creates strength.
Her voice trembling.
Lucian, please.
The Sun Court collectors are already on the road. Prince Oren sent them an hour ago. They will be here by nightfall. If you bind us to this
experiment, and they arrive while we are vulnerable.
Let them arrive.
He turned to Ilara, his expression hardening.
Do you think I am blind, Ilara? Do you think I do not see the black carriages cresting the hill?
He pointed toward the horizon. Through the breaks in the storm clouds, the silhouette of a large vehicle could be seen moving along the ridge. The Sun Court's seal was emblazoned on its side, though it was too far to read clearly. She gripped the railing, her knuckles white.
Lucian, what do we do? We stand together.
He raised his ring again, this time directing the light not at the sky, but at the people below. The golden glow intensified, washing over the courtyard like a sunrise in miniature. It did not warm the air, but it warmed the spirit. Kale? Mara? Torin? Are you ready to fight for your lives? Not by dying for me, but by living with me? Kale looked at his hands, then up at Lucian. He nodded slowly. I am tired of dying in the dark. Your Highness, I will stand. Mara squeezed her husband's hand. We are with you, she said. Her voice was firm now, stripped of fear. Not because we must, but because we want to. One by one, the others nodded. The collective will surge through Lucian, a tangible wave of power that stabilized his footing on the wet stone. Royal authority, 100. The system chimed in his mind, a pleasant, resonant sound. Lucian exhaled. He had done it. He had turned a curse into a covenant, but as he looked at the approaching carriages on the horizon, he felt a chill that had nothing to do with the rain. Ilara leaned close to his ear.
You have saved them. I know.
He watched